The double-edged fury of Hurricane Andrew. The storm heads across the Gulf of Mexico after howling through southern Florida.
In its wake, battered businesses, flooded homes, and massive power outages. The extent of the damage is only now becoming apparent. Welcome to NewsHour in Washington. I'm Reed Collins.
And from CNN Center in Atlanta, I'm Bobby Batista. Hurricane Andrew is now on the prowl across the Gulf of Mexico, where it's picking up some of the power it lost during its menacing march through southern Florida. Let's check where the storm is headed at this time now with Charles Zooey.
A path of devastation, perhaps running into the hundreds of millions of dollars. If this scene is any indication, we're in the Cutler Ridge Mall in South Dade County. This area was very close to where the eye of Hurricane Andrew came ashore in South Florida shortly after 5 o'clock this morning, packing winds, sustained winds of about 140 miles an hour. And this is what's left behind: an overturned car, a blown out store. This entire mall, just about every store here, has been virtually shattered. This was a record store. Here you can see lines of oak trees and that have been sheared off at the trunks. Nothing left, totally denuded of leaves. Again, the shopping center looking like a battle scene right now. The National Guard just moving into the area right now. There was extensive looting. When we drove up here a short time ago, there were dozens of people going into the stores, getting bags full of clothing, bicycles, records, electronics, whatever they could carry out. You can see that the shopping center has been heavily damaged. They took advantage of this. This is by far the most serious example of looting that we've seen so far. The death toll in Andrew right now stands at 3 dead, but that is likely to go up. The authorities are investigating the possibility a fourth person was killed by the storm. 2 of the people were killed by falling trees, but as the day wears on, it's expected that the death toll, as I said, will go up, and 2, the damage toll. Now, there continue to be reports of looting, and police are doing their best, from what we're being told, to try to contain things, but situations like in the shopping center are giving rise to reports that, at least where South Dade County is concerned, there is no law enforcement in effect right now. Again, Hurricane Andrew moved across here at 5 o'clock this morning, raked across South Florida, and is now headed for the Gulf of Mexico. So far, to repeat, the death toll stands at 3. This is Charles Zooey reporting live from South Dade County, Florida.
All right, Charles, thank you. We might add that the Cutler Ridge area is about 10 miles north of Homestead, and the eye of the storm passed right over Homestead. CNN's Bonnie Anderson is in the hard-hit town now, and she joins us with the latest. Bonnie?
Bobby, police sources have just told me that they have confirmed at least 3 deaths so far, 2 in a trailer home, 1 in a nearby neighborhood. We also learned that a mile north of Homestead, a young girl was killed when the roof of her home crushed her. I am at City Hall in Homestead. There is devastation all around. By that I mean buildings leveled. We're talking roofs completely lifted off, cars overturned, and trees strewn everywhere. Across the street, about a quarter of a mile, was a trailer park where there was once 400 different trailers. With the exception of 2 or 3 shells, they were all flattened, completely flattened. Just a few moments ago, I was speaking with Alex Muxa, the city manager, and with tears in his eyes, he said it took him 12 years to build this city, and he could not believe the devastation. He could not believe the destruction that is all around him. He and his crews are at work. They just restored power to the hospital here, where we understand that the windows were blown out, but the hospital is up and running, and it will probably be receiving some of the casualties, the injuries from some of the nearby areas, such as Naranja, where we were earlier today. Reporting live from Homestead, this is Bonnie Anderson.
Well, the Gulf area isn't out of it yet. In fact, the hurricane is barely into the Gulf. Let's find out what's in store now, and we'll go to Flip Spiceland. Flip?
Thank you, Reed. We want to show you, first of all, our radar loop showing you the eye of the storm moving on offshore, and now the center of the storm about 40 miles to the southwest of Naples, Florida. Expected to continue on out into the Gulf, but sometime later today is going to take a bit of a northerly turn. Before I get away from this picture, we also want to point out that you start to see some breaks in here down in the storm. That is not necessarily so. We are losing it. First of all, it's moving farther and farther away from some of the radar sites in here, so we lose data. And secondly, some of the radar stations are out For example, the radar station is out at the National Hurricane Center. National Hurricane Center was hit pretty hard. The highest wind speed that was recorded as the storm moved on across was at the National Hurricane Center. They reported a wind gust of 164 miles an hour. They aren't positive yet, but it is possible that the radar dome on the top of the National Hurricane Center was knocked down. We also have lost data out of Key West, too. So these breaks that you see here as the loop moves on across are not necessarily there. The storm is still ferocious with top wind speeds of 140 miles an hour. Let me give you the latest coordinates and the latest data on the storm. It's still at 140 miles an hour. It is still moving to the west at 18 miles an hour. This is the one that's really odd because this thing is just raced on across. It never did slow down. As a matter of fact, picked up a little bit of speed as it moved across the southern tip of Florida. If you're plotting the storm, these are the latest coordinates: 25.7 north, 82.1 west. That places the center of the storm about 40 miles to the southwest of Naples, Florida. So where's it going to go now? Well, the National Hurricane Center has issued hurricane watches in effect from Mobile, Alabama to Sabine Pass, Texas. Basically, we are looking at the Louisiana coastline, and it is only a watch at this time because we're probably still another maybe 40 hours away, something like that, before, if it continues on this projected path, would move into the area, about 40 hours away. Maybe not that long because, as we said, the thing is really moving along. Quickly, I should mention hurricane watches are still in effect back here on the west coast of Florida, but those will probably be dropped later this afternoon. But next on the agenda, the coastal area of Louisiana. We'll watch it for you closely. Now back to Bobby.
All right, Flip, thanks. Well, Andrew first slammed ashore on Florida's Atlantic coast about 25 miles southwest of Miami early this morning with sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. At least 3 deaths have been blamed on the storm, or 2 rather deaths, in Dade County. There is a water shortage in the Miami area, and hundreds of thousands of people are without power. Despite extensive damage to cars, roofs, and shopping center windows, officials say it could have been worse. In the words of the emergency operations manager for Collier County, this was not the big one. Well, on the phone with us now is John Wilson, who is Emergency Management Director for Lee County, which includes the town of Fort Myers. And John, problems in your area?
Well, we're about 60 miles southwest of the center of the storm right now. We've been experiencing tropical storm force winds in our coastal areas and in the southern part of Cape Coral. We've closed some bridges. We're getting some reports of down power lines, but we certainly have not seen anything compared to what we've just seen in Dade County.
So most of the people in your area are not in evacuation centers at this time?
We have 6 shelters open, have about 12 to 1,300 people using them at this time. Hopefully they won't be there much longer, but we do have people in our shelters, and we have 1 of our 6 full at this time.
All right, our thanks to John Wilson of the Lee County area in southern Florida. Reed?
Well, as Andrew was roaring across the Florida Peninsula, getting back over open water into that area we just saw on the screen, the Gulf Coast was being hit by winds of 100 miles an hour and over. On the Gulf side of the state, CNN's Bill Delaney rode out the storm and joins us now on the phone. Bill?
Reed, very peaceful here now. Just in the last 35 minutes or so, the winds have become very calm. It's just kind of a calm, blustery day. The streets deserted. The difference between what happened here and the descriptions we're getting from the eastern coast are fairly dramatic. We have a lot of street signs knocked over. We have some smaller trees snapped in half and uprooted. We saw kind of a tin awning carport that had been really crumpled like paper. But for the most part, what we're seeing is some minor flooding. A few people even picking their way through those puddles in pickup trucks and such. A couple of windows blown out. But right now, the storm seems to have passed and quite a bit calmer than it was, Reed.
Okay, thank you, Bill Delaney, reporting live to us from Naples. Coming up next on NewsHour, sympathy from President Bush for the people of southern Florida. And the word is from the federal government that there are plans to help the cleanup and rebuilding after that storm. Andrew's invasion of Florida was on President Bush's mind early today. As he was leaving the White House for the campaign trail, Mr. Bush told reporters he wanted to express his heartfelt concerns to the people of Florida and signaled his intentions to act quickly to declare counties hit by the storm federal disaster areas, which is the first step toward providing federal help.
There will be 27 agencies of the government then ready to help in any way that the federal government can help. And I will be in touch during the day to see that everything runs smoothly and that we do everything we can to help the people down there. Apparently it is a very bad storm. The storm has kept the evaluation teams from sizing it up till now, but I expect that'll change during the day. But it's a serious matter, and my heart goes out to the people in Florida.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, has crews in place in Florida preparing to assist with the cleanup and recovery. The FEMA representation has been in the area since Friday, helping local officials and residents get ready for the storm. Wallace Stickney is the director of FEMA, and he says the first step is to assess the overall damage.
But at this time, we do not have any solid information about the magnitude of the damage, but it needs to be said, of course, that this will turn out to be one of the top 3 or 4 storms of the century. So we're expecting significant dollar damage, at least, as a result of the storm.
Stickney was speaking in Washington, but he's on his way to Florida, where he is scheduled to meet with the Governor Lawton Chiles and other officials this afternoon.
Reed, the Miami area television stations are on the air, and we take you now to a live broadcast from WSVN television in Kendall outside the Miami area. Let's listen in.
Here, if we can find out for the residents of this area, Kendall, Country Walk, and let them know where they need to go. They obviously are hearing that word that any way they can get out, they've got to get over to the nearest fire station or go see friends.
Carlos, did they say Country Walk was gone, basically?
Basically, we've got to get over there, take a look. We'll get you that video just as soon as we can. It does not sound pretty.
No, that's a highly populated area. It's very dense. Everything's very close together. That could be a tremendous blow.
And people there may not have evacuated. They may have tried to stick it out because that's further inland.
Right, well, that's close to the
That would be a surprise.
Kelly, I mean, my family, we live very close to where we thought the storm was going to be coming ashore. What was in the evacuation zone earlier when we were doing those stories yesterday, and I moved my family out to stay with my mother out in West Dade because I thought they'd be safer. So far, I think everything's okay, but we don't know. It seems like it's taken the brunt of the storm is out here where we thought we'd be safest and away from the water.
Just shows how unpredictable these storms could be, because that was the exact thought. We said go west, go west, go west. In fact, several of us were invited to stay in West Dade in the Kendall area, thinking that that would be the one place to go, and wouldn't you know it, that seems to be away from the water, close to the Everglades. It would be safe, and yet
They just haven't stood up to the wind. This is a fierce, very, very fierce storm. We've seen Hugo, we've seen Gilbert and other places. The damage we're seeing here as we move further out, the reports that you just heard that we're getting, it sounds like we have suffered some terrible, terrible damage here in South Florida from this storm.
You know, Carlos, we've been talking about the storm surge. Do you see any evidence of that, or is this mostly wind damage that you see? What caused the damage that you see, do you think?
The maximum damage that we see is obviously caused by the wind. It is the roofs, it is the cars that are pelted by the missiles, it is the trees that are felled, those whole chunks of Metro Rail that you saw that were torn off and thrown down. Luckily, no one was hurt there. As far as water damage, what we're seeing, it appears to be the rising water of that heavy, heavy rainfall that we all saw during the night, that we could hear pelting our roofs. But it doesn't appear, at least in the areas we've been, we have not been out to the coastal regions yet to see any of that storm surge. We just don't know yet.
We're bringing you a live noon broadcast from WSVN in the Kendall area of Miami, where it appeared that they were broadcasting out of their control room in that area because I'm sure power has been affected by the storm. That's our CNN affiliate down in that area. We will continue with our coverage of Hurricane Andrew and more right after this.
Now looking at our top story, the hurricane named Andrew has smashed across Florida. The howling winds now in the Gulf of Mexico. The monster storm roared across the area and went out south of Naples, Florida, about 8 o'clock this morning. It now is headed somewhere along the Gulf coastline, perhaps any place from Mobile over to Sabine Pass, where warnings have been posted. The coastal towns from Alabama to Texas bracing for a possible impact of the storm. New Orleans girded for the storm as well. Officials on Galveston Island in Texas are preparing their evacuation plans. Andrew came ashore near Miami at high tide a little before dawn this morning. The storm bringing with it a wall of water, winds gusting to more than 164 miles an hour. Deaths of at least 3 people in Florida are blamed on the storm. At least 1 person was killed when Andrew hit the Bahamas yesterday. Hundreds of thousands of people were moved out of their homes in Florida. Utilities officials say now at least 400,000 are without power. Areas south of Miami were hit heavily. The town of Homestead was devastated. CNN's Bonnie Anderson reporting that 90% of the structures in the area are damaged. 80% of all stores in the area look to be, to her, beyond repair.
Well, CNN's John Zarella joins us now from Cutler Ridge, which is not far from where the storm came ashore, for an update on how southern Dade County has fared. John?
Bobby, let me just set the scene. Cutler Ridge, not that far north from Homestead, and the damage is not much different. Behind me, we can see buildings that have been nearly leveled. A bank was just about leveled over here. A Holiday Inn just about leveled. And over on our side over here, you can see a Peaches record and tape store, which the whole front has been destroyed. There was a car that was overturned not far from here either. And what we've seen now is a shopping center that right here in the distance, and earlier today, just when we arrived about an hour ago, the looting was going on. There were a number of people running into the stores, just filling up their cars with whatever they could carry and then moving on out. About 30 minutes or so, the National Guard showed up. First, there were about 3 or 4 members of the National Guard who arrived, and then just about 10 minutes ago, an entire convoy arrived, about 100 of them. They're down in the distance there assembling, and some of them are walking the streets here. You can probably see them over here behind the poles. There's a couple of the members of the National Guard here trying to secure these stores. They've arrested at least 3 people here who were attempting to loot this particular shopping center in this area. But this is the kind of damage that we are seeing all along. Once you get south of Miami, I suppose if there's any good news to what has happened, the metropolitan area of Miami mostly was trees down, some roof damage, but that was primarily telephone poles knocked down, light poles knocked down. But the further you got south, the more you could see that this is where Andrew cut his swath as he headed west. Everything in this particular area just literally wiped out. Roofs off nearly every single home. That's a standard. Cars with trees on top of them, that's nearly a standard. We saw a bus overturned. We saw an airplane at Miami International Airport, a 727, its nose gear down into the water that was on the access runway, the taxi runway. One event after the other that just shows the enormity of what happened down here in South Dade County. Bobby?
All right, John, one thing we were not seeing in the pictures there with you were a lot of people, and I'm wondering if they're still in evacuation centers at this time or whether they've moved out and are trying to assess the damage.
I believe that there have been a few residents here who have come to check on their belongings, but when they arrived, they found looters. We believe that most people are still in evacuation shelters and just now beginning to leave. Bobby?
All right, John Zarella, thanks, reporting live from southern Dade County. Well, low tide on...
CNN Headline News, I'm Lynn Vaughn. It was the worst storm to directly hit the Miami area in a quarter of a century. Hurricane Andrew came ashore in Florida overnight, bringing 160-mile-an-hour winds, huge waves, and rain. CNN reporters have confirmed 3 deaths, 2 from falling trees, the 3rd from a heart attack. Many buildings were destroyed or damaged, and trees, utility poles, and highway signs were knocked down, making a number of roads impassable. Along the waterfront, fishing boats were washed up into the streets. Not even the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables escaped damage. A portion of its roof collapsed and a radar disk was damaged. The community of Homestead was particularly hard hit. Charles Erie reports from a shopping mall near Homestead that was hit by winds and looters.
Hurricane Andrew has left behind a path of devastation, perhaps running into the hundreds of millions of dollars. If this scene is any indication, we're in the Cutler Ridge Mall in South Dade County. This area was very close to where the eye of Hurricane Andrew came ashore in South Florida shortly after 5 o'clock this morning, packing winds, sustained winds of about 140 miles an hour. And this is what's left behind, an overturned car a blown-out store. This entire mall, just about every store here, has been virtually shattered. This was a record store. Here you can see lines of oak trees and that have been sheared off at the trunks. Nothing left, totally denuded of leaves. Again, the shopping center looking like a battle scene right now. The National Guard just moving into the area right now. There was extensive looting. When we drove up here a short time ago, there were dozens of people going into the stores, getting bags full of clothing, bicycles, records, electronics, whatever they could carry out. You can see that the shopping center has been heavily damaged. They took advantage of this. This is by far the most serious example of looting that we've seen so far. The death toll in Andrew right now stands at 3 dead, but that is likely to go up. The authorities are investigating the possibility a 4th person was killed by the storm. 2 of the people were killed by falling trees, but as the day wears on, it's expected that the death toll, as I said, will go up, and 2, the damage toll. Now, there continue to be reports of looting, and police are doing their best, from what we're being told, to try to contain things, but situations like in this shopping center are giving rise to reports that, at least where South Dade County is concerned, there is no law enforcement in effect right now. Again, Hurricane Andrew moved across here at 5 o'clock this morning, raked across South Florida, and is now headed for the Gulf of Mexico. So far, to repeat, the death toll stands at 3.
President Bush says he will declare the region a disaster area. Aides say the government will wait for a list of the most devastated counties before any declaration is made. People from all around the country are calling Florida to try to find out about friends and relatives.
We're being inundated with phone calls at the emergency center with people that are asking about their relatives. At this stage, we don't have any of that information, and I hope they will wait much later before they make those calls, because they're tying up our lines as we're trying to move the kind of assistance and relief into the area that we need to.
Governor Childs says there's good news for people with relatives in Miami. He says that city was not hit as hard as originally believed. Residents along the northern Gulf Coast are bracing for Andrew. A watch has been issued from Mobile, Alabama to Sabine Pass, Texas. Residents of Grand Isle, Louisiana are being evacuated. Andrew is expected to regroup in the Gulf of Mexico over the next 2 days, then head north. Earlier, Bill Delaney rode out the storm as it passed through Florida's west coast.
The difference between what happened here and the descriptions we're getting from the eastern coast are fairly dramatic. We have a lot of street signs knocked over. We have some smaller trees snapped in half and uprooted. We saw kind of a tin awning carport that had been really crumpled like paper. But for the most part, what we're seeing is some minor flooding. A few people even picking their way through those puddles in pickup trucks and such. A couple of windows blown out. But right now, the storm seems to have passed, and quite a bit calmer than it was.
Residents of the Bahamas are cleaning up what Andrew left behind there yesterday. The Bahamas' outer islands were the hardest hit, including Eleuthera. There were reports of huge waves and 120-mile-an-hour winds. The government says 4 people lost their lives. At last report, much of the capital city of Nassau was without power. Stay tuned to CNN Headline News. We'll have updates on Hurricane Andrew throughout the day.
Hurricane Andrew churns across Florida and heads into the Gulf of Mexico. Now it appears it may have its sights set on Louisiana. The aftermath. The pictures tell the story, with the scale of the destruction just now becoming clear. And in California, a wildfire jumps a containment line, putting another community in danger. More about that. This is Newsday. Hello, I'm Lou Waters. Cheryl Atkinson is off. Here's what's happening. Hurricane Andrew is heading out into the Gulf of Mexico after chewing up a large area of southern Florida. Radar shows the eye of the hurricane now offshore about 85 miles southwest of Naples. It remains powerful with sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. The storm hit land before dawn, with the eye passing about 25 miles southwest of Miami. Damage is heavy, but right now it's hard to get a complete picture of the devastation. CNN reporters confirm the storm has killed at least 3 people in Florida. President Bush says the government is sending help.
I just very briefly want to express my heartfelt concern to the people of Florida on this devastating storm. Apparently it's one of the worst in 6, probably the worst in 6 decades. We have already got 2 FEMA teams, that's the government emergency teams down there in Florida. I will be declaring today that Florida is a disaster area.
The question now, what's next? The National Weather Service has issued a hurricane watch for the coastal area between Mobile, Alabama, and Sabine Pass, Texas. That includes the entire coast of Louisiana. Nearly 1,500 people already have been evacuated. The Louisiana barrier island of Grand Isle. On its way west, Hurricane Andrew slammed into South Florida coast to coast. And in some areas, officials say they can't even estimate the damage. CNN's John Zarella has been surveying the devastation in the Homestead area, which is a little southwest of Miami. John, I hear it's awful.
Lou, it certainly is. You can't begin to estimate the damage here. Behind me is what's left of a Peaches record store. And as cameraman Ben Gonzalez continues to pan across, you'll see some of the other damage that's in this area. You can see that there are many, many buildings that have been almost completely level. A car is overturned not far from here. People are saying, coming up to us and saying, we have nowhere to go tonight. Where are we supposed to go? Who can we call? How can we get help? Hopefully some of that federal help will be here very quickly, because I can tell you that tonight in this area could be very, very bad, considering the fact that looters have been out here all day. Right in broad daylight of the National Guard. We can see a National Guard vehicle going down the road here now. There are several National Guard, a whole group now that's assembling right, Ben Gonzalez, you can pan right over there, you can see them. This is pretty much a staging area now here in Cutler Ridge, where we are, which is just a little bit north of Homestead. As you can see, they're assembling. The looters are doing it right in broad daylight in front of them. It's amazing what's going on. They're chasing them down the streets, chasing them away. As soon as the guardsmen walk away, they go back in and begin looting again. I assume if it's happening here, it's happening in many other parts of this particular part of Dade County, because buildings, homes are leveled. Roofs have been taken off. Every home that we saw as we drove down the Florida Turnpike South had its roof taken off. There are Holiday Inn across the way here. The windows, everything smashed out. Another several buildings, a furniture rental place completely demolished. Self-storage warehouse completely demolished. What we are looking at now, again, is a situation where we have got just a massive amount of I'm sorry. Okay, what we've got now, you can see, is the man being held down on the ground by those National Guard troops. That was one of the most dramatic scenes we saw. He had a .38 caliber revolver. Many people here apparently had revolvers. That's the thing that they were worried about, and that is a big concern here as nightfall will come to this area in another 6 hours. On Miami Beach, many boats washed ashore down on Biscayne Bay. Scenes of devastation there as well, but nothing like we've been seeing here. Lou?
John, I would assume that folks hearing your report or hearing of your report will want to get back to that area to see if one of their homes is the one you're talking about. Are they beginning to trickle back yet?
There are people trickling back to this area now. There are lots of cars on the roads. Lots of the shopkeepers who own these buildings here were coming in, and they just stood by and watched the looters ransacking their buildings. I assume that when they come back, as we saw with many people, they're finding they have nothing left to come back to. And again, we had people coming up to our satellite truck asking if it was a telephone operation that we could put calls out for them on telephone, because they have nowhere to go and they're wandering around, some of them, in a daze out here, not knowing what to do or where to go. Lou?
Okay, John Zarella near Homestead, Cutler Ridge, Florida, reporting on the damage there. We've just gotten indication from the White House that the president is on his way to Florida, or will be on his way to Florida this afternoon, arriving in Opelika, Florida at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll tell you what that's all about as soon as we know what it's all about. Flip Spiceland now is tracking the storm, which we indicated is southwest of Naples, still churning up heavy water and headed for the Louisiana coast. Here's Flip.
Yes, indeed, Lou. Hurricane Andrew, as of 2 o'clock this afternoon Eastern Time, 25.7 north, 83.1 west. Those are the coordinates. That places the center of the storm just about 85 miles to the southwest of Naples, as Lou told you. Still moving at 18 miles an hour and still moving due west with Louisiana up here. So what's going to happen? It's going to turn. Top wind speed still 140 miles an hour. If there's any good news at this, National Hurricane Center says they expect no further strengthening over the next 24 hours. Yet we calculate it is about 40 hours away from the Louisiana coast, but first it has to make that northerly turn. Let's take a look at that for just a moment if we can. We wanted to show you the radar out of Fort Myers, and you can see the eye of the storm down here to the south of Naples. We had to change. We've lost our loop. We had a moving picture of this, but in fact the storm is now moving far enough away from the radar sites that we can no longer get a moving loop for you, but you can see by the still picture that it is just off the coast. Here's the eye of the storm. Now take a look at this dramatic satellite photograph of a loop, and you can watch it move all the way across. Starts out here in the Bahamas, goes right across South Florida up to its present position just offshore. This is a little conceiving because it looks as though that it's going to move to the north now. It isn't. It's still moving due west. But it is expected to take that northerly turn later today, more likely tonight. We have projected the path for you, and we want to show you that. The National Hurricane Center has actually made this projection. This is not our doing. They project every 6 hours as to where the hurricane is expected to be by coordinates. So we plotted that for you. This is where it is now. By plotting each one of the coordinates over the next 48 hours, we bring it on shore somewhere in southern Louisiana. This is the path that the National Hurricane Center has plotted at this time. That would bring it just about New Iberia. It may be a little to the west of that, it may be a little to the east, and the 40 hours that we're talking about may change because it might slow down a little bit as it approaches the area. But we will have more on Hurricane Andrew as things change. We will keep you up to date on all of this. We do expect that change to the north late today, more likely tonight, and right now we are looking at a landfall sometime in the wee hours of Wednesday morning. More coming up later. Now back to Lou.
All right, Flip, coming up on Newsday, more on Hurricane Andrew. We'll have a live report from Florida's western coastline, the Gulf Coast, the latest target of the storm as it charges into the Gulf of Mexico. 23 major wildfires are burning in the western United States. Hundreds of homes have been destroyed. We'll have an update on that, too. All ahead. As we've been reporting, Hurricane Andrew swept ashore just south of Miami before dawn this morning and quickly crossed the Florida peninsula. Frank Ranella is the Public Information Director in Cape Coral on Florida's Gulf Coast. He's on the line now. And Frank, you're up near Fort Myers, and dotted all along that coastline are expensive homes and condominiums. A lot of folks are gone for the season and wanting to know what's happened to their property. What can you tell us about it?
Well, we've been spared a brunt of the storm. We've been monitoring it all night, watching it. We've been extremely lucky that it's maintained the western track and has gone well south of us. We've got crews out now monitoring our city. We're still watching for potential flooding, watching to see if it continues to the western track. We've got more than 100 miles of saltwater canals and the 400 miles that we've got in our community. So we're still not out of the problem yet, but we can face some potential flooding.
So flooding is your biggest problem? None of those big yachts damaged or those homes along the shore?
We haven't had any serious flooding yet, but we're not out of the woods. We still have some squalls that are going to have to come through the area. Fortunately, the storm seems to be maintaining its western track, and if it continues to do that, we shouldn't have much in the way of potential flooding. We should be able to escape that.
And nobody hurt?
No, we've had no injuries reported, no serious damage in our community. As we go through and verify that, we're going to be looking to the communities to the south of us to see what kind of assistance we can do and render to them.
All right, Frank, good luck to you. Frank Ranella, Public Information Director in Cape Coral, Florida. Andrew killed at least one person as it cut through the Bahamas last night. The storm knocked down trees and caused flooding in Nassau, but the city's oceanfront hotels and casinos suffered little damage in the then 85-mile-an-hour winds. Heavier winds struck the outer islands where dozens of homes were demolished, and that's where the death of the one person was reported. In the
Residents of Florida brace to see the damage wrought by a deadly hurricane as Gulf Coast residents brace for its impact. CNN Headline News, I'm Lynn Vaughn. At least 8 people have been killed by the powerful force of Hurricane Andrew. And the White House says President Bush will head to that area this afternoon to assess the damage. Several hours ago, the main problems were torrential rain and 160-mile-an-hour winds. Now the big problems are looting and cleaning up the damage. Hurricane Andrew spent the morning ravaging southern Florida. The result is an estimated hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. 1 million people were told to evacuate. Now they're beginning to trickle back, not believing what they're seeing. Many don't have homes to go back to, and looting is reported. The National Guard has been called into some areas. Reporters say the looting started just after the rain stopped.
President Bush has declared much of South Florida disaster area, a federal disaster area, as a result of destruction from Hurricane Andrew, which roared through this area early this morning, leaving behind a swath of destruction. Andrew's 140-mile-an-hour winds reduced shopping centers to a virtual mess. In the aftermath of the storm that had been predicted to be carrying winds as high as 164 miles an hour in gusts. As investigators moved in along with claims adjusters this morning to survey the damage, they found neighborhoods where entire houses had lost their roofs. Some houses had been flattened entirely. Many people decided to ride out the storm in these houses. There are at least 3 confirmed deaths, and the death toll could go much higher. Soon after the rain stopped this morning and the winds died down, looters moved into many deserted shopping centers that had been heavily damaged by the storm. The National Guard was called in to try to stop the looting. They did so for the most part, but most of the looters, in fact, got away. Hurricane Andrew at this hour is moving out into the Gulf of Mexico, where it is expected to gain strength and take aim on the north and Gulf Coast states of Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. It could strike those states anywhere in that zone sometime later this week.
Emergency workers are just now beginning to reach the really bad areas. They expect the death toll to rise as they get into areas hard hit. Travel is difficult because debris is everywhere. Right now, Andrew is making its way across the Gulf of Mexico. It is picking up steam as it goes. It's about 85 miles southwest of Naples. Winds are being clocked at 140 miles an hour. That storm is moving at 18 to 20 miles an hour. The best guess as to Andrew's next target is an area between Mobile, Alabama and Sabine Pass, Texas, but that is only a guess. Red Cross officials in the Bahamas say 1 person was killed when Andrew ripped through. Government reports say 4 people were killed. Huge waves and 120-mile-an-hour winds ravaged outlying islands yesterday. The newly sworn-in Prime Minister is urging calm and directing people to shelters. Many tourists were evacuated.
An update now on Hurricane Andrew. We have the latest pictures out of Homestead, Florida, where the eye of Andrew passed early this morning, just before dawn, about 5 a.m. Packing winds of 140 miles an hour and gusts to 168 miles an hour. This area was hard hit. Early estimates of all damage in Florida, and these are very, very early estimates, $50 million. This is according to Marlin Fitzwater at the White House, where the president is asking the FEMA team, the emergency team, to provide emergency aid to Florida, which now several counties of which have been declared disaster areas. According to Fitzwater, eventual damage could reach $6 or $7 billion. Buildings have been demolished. Looting is widespread today. Associated Press reports Andrew has killed at least 8 people in Florida and 4 in the Bahamas. We have about a 4-hour-old report of nursing homes in the Homestead area having trouble with several minor injuries. The town of Homestead is unreachable by US 1, the main route into town. Now we're looking at a satellite picture where the center of the hurricane is now passed over the peninsula and is located about 85 miles west-southwest of Naples, Florida. That's on the Gulf Coast. Forecasters expect this hurricane now to turn north and head toward Louisiana. The National Weather Service has issued a hurricane watch for a coastal area stretching from Sabine Pass, Texas to Mobile, Alabama. And we will continue to keep an eye on the storm for you. And that's it for this news day. I'm Lou Waters. The International Hour is next. Frank Sesno is in Washington. He has a look at what's coming up. Frank.
Thanks, Lou. And indeed, coming up next, we'll have more on Hurricane Andrew as the storm churns across southern Florida and heads to the Gulf of Mexico. We'll take a look at that with a live report. In Sarajevo, Bosnian defense forces battle it out with Serb militias. We'll have the latest. And do asteroids pose a danger to Earth? An expert will help answer this question, these stories, and of course much more just ahead.
To our viewers around the world, good evening from London. I'm Hilary Bowker.
And good afternoon from Washington. I'm Frank Sesno. On the International Hour, devastation in parts of South Florida. Hurricane Andrew has blown through.
We think some shopping centers have been just blown away, and we have railroad cars upturned, a lot of car damage, a lot of roof damage.
And the danger is not over, only shifting westward.
Also ahead, the Serb siege and the desperate attempt to break it. Bosnian Muslim forces are fighting back.
But first to Hurricane Andrew, which leaves behind a battered Florida peninsula and is now moving west across the Gulf Coast. At this hour, the eye of the storm is about 85 miles southwest of Naples, Florida. Howling winds slammed into Florida before dawn this morning, ripping off roofs and leveling some homes. Gusts of up to 168 miles an hour whipped through the peninsula. The Associated Press reports at least 8 deaths in Florida. Andrew's eye passed through the town of Homestead, about 25 miles southwest of Miami. Homes splintered as if they were made of balsa wood. Entire trailer parks were flattened. City officials say they cannot believe the amount of damage.
90% of the community has been affected. There's probably, guessing, $250 to $300 million worth of damage. We've got the power plant was hit. Homestead has its own electric system. The roof caved in. We have ties with FP&L and other utilities. Both ties have been lost. We lost both generators at the water tower. We've got no water. There's 5 trailer parks. Every single one of them, we have over 3,000 people live in trailer parks, have been wiped out.
Flattened.
Flattened completely. You could look. It's completely leveled.
In terms of loss of life and injuries, what do you fear?
Right now, we had a problem last night evacuating a nursing home that nobody had evacuated. The police department did a great job and got them out. Right now, we know of 1 death and possibly 2 others at the trailer parks. We found a guy in one of the trailers and we took him to the hospital for insulin. But right now we know of 1 for sure.
This must be, personally...
You know, it's, I've been in Homestead now 15 years, 10 as city manager, and you see these pictures on TV. And you really, we've worked so hard in this community to build what we got. It's 12 years of my life.
Gone?
Not gone, we just got to start over. Never gone, there's always tomorrow.
The National Guard has been called out to clamp down on looters who've been picking through debris outside shattered storefronts, looking for something to steal. Officials say they're also concerned about the drinking water supply. A widespread power outage could mean a loss of water pressure, since water sitting stagnant in pipes could become contaminated. Shelters across the state are filled with anxious residents. Meanwhile, many say they're already thinking about how they'll have to rebuild their homes and businesses. This afternoon, President Bush extended federal disaster relief to 3 Florida counties, which will permit residents and businesses to use federal emergency funds. And now let's check in at the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida, where forecaster Max Mayfield is standing by. Mr. Mayfield, what is... I'm sorry, I thought we had Max Mayfield. We don't. We have Flip Spiceland, our own. Flip, what's the status just now?
I'll have to fill in right now, Frank. We have Hurricane Andrew offshore by about 85 miles southwest of Naples, as you just said. These are the coordinates. We are expecting an update to this position at 5 o'clock this afternoon Eastern Time. Still moving at 18 miles an hour and still moving to the due west. But we do believe that later today or tonight, that direction will change and it will start to move to the north. Top wind speed still at 140 miles an hour. Our job now at the weather desk is to help you find out where it is going. And the National Hurricane Center plots these positions for us throughout the future, and they bring the storm over the next 40 hours up into the coastal area of New Orleans, Louisiana. There is currently a hurricane watch in effect from Sabine Pass, Texas, all the way over to Mobile, Alabama. That is a hurricane watch, so we believe the strike probabilities are very high within that area. If you were to plot the specific coordinates, you would bring it right along this path and in through this area. So we do believe there will be a northerly turn. We want to show you a dramatic satellite loop that we have for you as you watch the storm sweep across South Florida and out on into the Gulf. The water in the Gulf is as warm or warmer than the water in the Atlantic, so it is expected to lose no strength at all. The National Hurricane Center says that it is expected to maintain the strength for probably the next 24 hours, but that is not to say that it would not gain some strength once the storm gets fully out on into the Gulf. Quickly, before I toss it back, we want to tell you a couple of things that we don't know because people are calling, specifically the Keys. We would tell you what we knew. We don't know. Lines are down. There has been a huge power outage, as you heard earlier, and we have received no information at all from the Keys. How bad was the storm when it went through Homestead, where the damage was absolutely devastating? We don't know that either because at the Homestead Air Force Base, where the National Weather Service office is located, they shut down, intelligent folks that they are, and left before the storm hit. So we do not know how strong the wind speed was there. It was at the National Hurricane Center at Coral Gables where they reported that wind gust of 168 miles an hour. We still don't know, but we believe that the radar dome on the top of the National Hurricane Center building was destroyed because we were no longer getting radar pictures from there. The heaviest rainfall we found was at the Miami airport, and that was 2 inches. You saw an awful lot of flooding. That's from the storm surge. We expected more rain than that, but the storm is moving so very, very quickly that no one really picked up a lot of rain. The heaviest we could find was the 2-inch rainfall amount. Remember, we'll have updates for you constantly, but these will change at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. Now back to Frank Sesno.
Thanks, Flip. Well, as we monitor Hurricane Andrew from afar, millions have been living with it dangerously close. We go now to CNN's Bonnie Anderson, who is standing by live in Cutler Ridge, Florida. Bonnie, what is the sights and sounds and scene where you are?
Well, Frank, right now the wind is picking up somewhat dramatically. In about the last 5 minutes, we went from almost a very calm to a dramatic wind that is now again swaying some trees. We're also smelling very strongly natural gas and gasoline, and so that has a number of the people around here a bit concerned. The damage to this area was quite severe. We're only about 10 miles away from Homestead, which apparently took the brunt of the storm. From here down to Homestead, it's almost as though it's a progression of damage. There are cars turned upside down. There's also been a tremendous amount of looting as a result. We're at a shopping center that up until yesterday had a number of very, very nice stores, and right now those that weren't boarded up and even some of those that were have been totally looted and decimated. The National Guard has arrived and they are on the scene and they're armed and chasing away looters. We indeed have been seeing looters all along the 20-30 mile stretch, and they seem to be frightened off by absolutely nobody. They are going at their bounty hunting with almost leisure. What we also know this afternoon is that President Bush is expected to arrive. We're also told by the city manager in Homestead that Governor Lawton Chiles was going to helicopter to Homestead. I don't know if they're going to reconsider those plans, considering the winds have picked up dramatically and it looks like we have at least a squall line moving in. Reporting live from Cutler Ridge, I'm Bonnie Anderson.
Thanks, Bonnie. Before reaching Florida, Andrew cut a deadly swath across the Bahamas. 4 people were reported killed there. The storm lashed the islands with huge waves, 120-mile-an-hour winds, and torrential rain. Nassau was spared the brunt of the storm, but many areas are without power or telephone service now. The international airport was closed before the storm came ashore. One official says Andrew is the first major hurricane to hit the Bahamas in 50 years.
Good afternoon from CBS News. This is Newsbreak. Hurricane Andrew's winding up for a second blow at the U.S. mainland. The storm crossed South Florida this morning, killing at least 8 people. It's now in the Gulf of Mexico, heading for another landfall later this week. A hurricane watch is in effect from Alabama to Texas. President Bush is flying to Florida to inspect damage from the storm. The U.S.
The storm has passed in Florida, but the devastation Hurricane Andrew has caused is only now becoming clear.
Surging tides, powerful winds. Andrew now is leaving Florida. It's headed for the Louisiana coast.
And if the storm wasn't bad enough, looters are compounding the misery in southern Florida. This is Early Prime. I'm Cheryl Atkinson.
I'm Lou Waters. Hello. Here's what's happening. The worst is over for South Florida. Andrew has left the state. The question now, where is it headed? At last report, the hurricane was centered in the Gulf of Mexico, about 85 miles southwest of Naples, Florida. It is moving west, but it's expected to turn north and head toward Louisiana. The National Weather Service has issued a hurricane watch for the coastal area stretching from Sabine Pass, Texas, to Mobile, Alabama. Andrew has left a path of destruction in South Florida. Buildings have been flattened. Cars have been overturned. Associated Press says at least 12 people died, 8 of them in Florida, 4 in the Bahamas. The hurricane hit land before dawn about 25 miles south of Miami. The surf tossed fishing boats into the streets. At the airport, the winds pushed a passenger jet through a fence. And the storm continues to churn out there in the Gulf of Mexico. Flip Spicen joins us now with the latest bead on Andrew.
Thank you, Lou. Hurricane Andrew, now located at 25.7 north, 83.1 west. This places the center of the storm about 85 miles to the southwest of Naples, Florida. However, in just 1 hour, we will have new coordinates and a new geographic position. It is still moving to the west at 18 miles an hour, and it is going to make a turn to the north. There is little doubt about that. The question is how much of a turn, and thus the reason for the hurricane watch in effect from Sabine Pass all over to Mobile, Alabama. It is somewhere within this area. Top wind speed at 140 miles an hour. National Hurricane Center says it is unlikely to change in strength over the next 24 hours. But the water in the Gulf is just as warm as the water in the Atlantic, if not warmer. So certainly a decrease in strength is not likely. Where will it go next? Well, the National Hurricane Center plots the positions for us. They give us into the future coordinates across the Gulf. We plotted the coordinates for you, and it is along this dotted line, if you plot out all the coordinates, that we carry the storm over the next less than 40 hours now, bringing it into the coast of Louisiana sometime in the wee hours of Wednesday morning. Early Wednesday morning, it should take this path if those coordinates are correct. The National Hurricane Center, the first one to tell you that once you get out here on the end of it, large errors may occur. So we have another map to show you, our probability of landfall map. Anyone within the orange here, or yellow, between 10 and 20%, over 20% between this bright red area that you see in here. This is the probability of where the hurricane may hit. Now, as it moves closer to land, obviously these probabilities would increase. But with a day and a half to go, 20%, the highest probabilities we have, actually 23, 24% right in here. And that is the area that we've shaded on in the orange. We'll keep you posted as best we can. Again, new positions coming out in about an hour, and I'll be back in about 15 minutes or so. We'll take a look at the national weather and how that national weather is affecting the steering of Hurricane Andrew. Cheryl?
All right, Flip. Up and down Florida's east coast, people have had a few more hours now to see what Andrew has left behind. In areas like Cutler Ridge, just south of Miami, it's enough to make some people cry. Bonnie Anderson is there and has this report. Bonnie?
Well, the winds are continuing to build slowly, I might add. There was a squall that came through just a short while ago, dumping a little bit of rain. Not a lot, but enough to make things quite difficult for people who have been struggling all day here. Now, some of the greatest damage occurred between Cutler Ridge and Homestead, which is about 8 to 10 miles south of here. And we've been told by a firefighter in a town just outside of Homestead that this morning a young girl died when the roof of her home collapsed on her. City manager of Homestead has also told us that he has reports of 3 deaths there. Indeed, city officials, when we arrived this morning, everyone appeared to be quite stunned. It was still storming. People were coming out, taking a look at the damage. We're told by the city officials that 90% of the community was damaged, most of it severely. We took a tour of the city, and I must say I find it hard to dispute some of those estimates. Some of the worst destruction was at the city's 5 trailer parks. This one had 400 trailers in it. By morning, only the shells of 4 or 5 remained. This left a number of people wandering in search of shelter today, and police in search of possible injuries.
And we can't find any place to go. And we had to move out of our trailer park.
Have you been by there?
Oh yes, it's a wreck. There's nothing left.
Well, we were talking about the live people too. Let's use the 2 or 3 dogs per trailer park and just do them first and cover all the major trailer parks.
Now, the National Guard and some other city and state officials have done a bit of cleaning up on the road between here and Homestead. It is certainly not what it looked like this morning. John Zarella reports.
As Andrew left South Florida, the looters arrived. The National Guard subduing and arresting several looters, at least one in this dramatic scene carrying a gun.
Take your gun. Get the gun out of there. Get the gun away. Hey.
About 100 guardsmen came to this one area of South Dade County called Cutler Ridge. But by the time they arrived, dozens of people had already torn through stores in this heavily damaged shopping center. Many looters simply ran off carrying the goods. Others backed their cars up to the store and loaded up. Many buildings around this shopping center were destroyed too. The devastation in South Dade, where the eye of the storm barreled across, brought tears as families reunited and assessed the damage. At Miami International Airport, a 727 jet was nose down in the water on a taxiway. A little further south, a tow truck hauled a chunk of expressway sign superstructure down the highway. The scenes of destruction here are widespread, and the losses appear substantial. John Zarella, CNN, in South Dade County.
I am told by the National Guard that Governor Lawton Chiles is making his way here right now by helicopter. He will be visiting this area as well as apparently touching down in Homestead. Reporting live, I'm Bonnie Anderson.
Florida's Gulf Coast was spared the kind of destruction we saw on the eastern side of the state. Winds gusting up to 100 miles an hour hit Everglades City, Marco Island, and the Naples beachfront. Damage is reported, but as one official puts it, this was not the big one. Andrew uprooted trees and downed power lines along the southwest Gulf Coast.
More than 1 million Florida residents had been ordered to leave their homes and head for shelters in advance of the storm. Officials say it looked as though about 700,000 people obeyed that order. However, many people, from elderly folks in high-rises to homeless folks living under bridges, chose to ride out the storm. The evacuation order still stands, but many residents are heading home anyway, eager to get a look at what's left of their property.
President Bush's plane is expected to land in Florida at around 5:30 Eastern this afternoon for a tour of hurricane damage in the Miami area. He has already declared Dade, Monroe, and Broward counties disaster areas and promised $50 million in aid. Mr. Bush says emergency teams in Florida will help people cope with Andrew's impact.
There will be 27 agencies of the government then ready to help in any way that the federal government can help. And I will be in touch during the day to see that everything runs smoothly and that we do everything we can to help the people down there. Apparently it is a very bad storm. The storm has kept the evaluation teams from sizing it up till now, but I expect that'll change during the day. But it's a serious matter, and my heart goes out to the people in Florida.
Mr. Bush spoke this morning before making scheduled campaign trips to New Jersey and Connecticut.
We will continue, of course, to follow Hurricane Andrew as it moves into the Gulf and onto its next target.
Also coming up.
From Channel 9, Central Florida's news leader, Bob Opsahl, Barbara West, and Steve Jerry's weather. This is Eyewitness News, live at 5.
Hurricane Andrew slams into South Florida. At least 8 people are dead and damage is in the millions.
Packing winds of more than 140 miles per hour, Andrew was the worst hurricane to hit South Florida in decades. Metro-Dade police have now ordered a dusk to dawn curfew to help prevent looting.
Some of the worst damage was around Homestead, where the eye of the storm passed over. That town is now without power or water.
Good evening. Here's your first look at the news tonight. Hurricane Andrew is now in the Gulf of Mexico, regaining its strength and leaving major damage in its wake.
It was reportedly the worst storm to hit Miami since 1926. And so far tonight, we still have no word on damage from the Keys. We begin our live team coverage now with reporter Richard Ransom of our Florida News Network, live from Homestead. Richard?
President Bush is scheduled to arrive here in South Florida at 6:30 tonight to see for himself the damage that Hurricane Andrew left behind. He has already declared the Miami area a disaster area. So far, the death toll from this storm is 12, 4 in the Bahamas and 8 in Florida. No official damage estimate yet, but everyone believes it will hit the billions of dollars. And when you survey the damage that Andrew left behind, it's easy to see how those dollars will add up. He started bringing rains about 1:15 this morning. By 4:30, Andrew struck the South Florida coastline with awesome force. In areas such as Homestead and southern Miami, wind gusts were recorded at speeds of, get this, 168 miles an hour. Here's a look at the kind of damage that awaited Miami when it woke up this morning. The destruction is everywhere. More than 1 million homes are without power. Some will stay in the dark for at least a week. But even those who lost everything say they're just thankful they're alive to talk about it.
The house started to shake real hard, and in the rain, you could hear the rain coming in. And I really didn't think much about it until, it started to get daylight out, and I could see through here, there was a lot of light. And I opened up that door, I guess around 6:30, and I could, and that's when I realized how lucky we really were.
I thank God that we're fine, Everybody in the neighborhood's okay too. It's unbelievable. You're leaning up against a wall in a closet and you can feel it shaking and you really feel like this is it. But we made it, so that's good, But it was really scary. I wouldn't do it again. Never, ever again. Lock the door, don't even board it up, and just walk out.
We spotted some animals who can count themselves among the lucky as well. This little guy had no idea where to go, but even they did not head to the ocean like the surfer did, right in the middle of Andrew's fury. Some people are going to think you're a little crazy, for doing this.
It's actually not that bad. I've seen it a lot worse on other occasions, on other storms that have passed by.
As Miami begins to recover, much of the city is clearly frustrated by the power outages and traffic jams, and others are rebuilding, even if it is one tree at a time. Now, there are some scattered reports of minor looting in Miami, but the National Guard has been called out by Florida's Governor Lawton Chiles, and so far, nothing serious has happened in that regard. Right now, everyone is just celebrating that the sun is out, although there is a tornado watch, but I doubt that the sun is out on the western half of the state. That's where Kathy Bellich is live. Kathy?
Well, Richard, the skies are clearing a little bit here, too, and the sun is trying to come out. It's really hard to believe that just a few hours ago there were winds packing 80 to 100 mile-an-hour speeds coming through this area. There are some reminders right behind me. You can see the roof of this Comfort Inn ripped off, and pieces of it were flying around earlier today. Some of the guests were afraid to go out of the hotel because of that. Naples and Marco Island really got pretty well battered. Just about everywhere you look, you could see the wrath of Hurricane Andrew.
Faced with a narrow bridge, 75-mile-an-hour winds, and a virtual whiteout, we decided not to take this road any farther out to the beach. This gas station was closed today. It looks as though it's going to be closed for quite some time. Power lines were down by the high winds, and we saw a few lines throw sparks. Masking tape did not protect some windows from being blown out. This medical supply store fell prey to the storm. Driving down US 41 was like driving through a combat zone. You had to dodge debris, watch out for the blasts of wind, and traffic lights. Most of them were out, some of them were down. For anyone who was skeptical about whether a hurricane would hit Florida again, take a good look at this.
Now, officials here in Collier County are still trying to get a handle on the total damages here. And because the winds really just left over the last couple of hours, many people have not yet returned to their homes to see just what kind of damage they're in for and what kind of repairs they'll have to do. Kathy Bellich reporting live from Collier County.
All right, Kathy, thank you. It's amazing how quickly things can clear after the hurricane has passed through. Well, before the hurricane hit, more than 1 million South Floridians were evacuated to the north.
And many of them came here to Orlando only to learn that every hotel room in the city was booked. So they turned to shelters. Jane Wattrell joins us now live from Dr. Phillips High School with more on their situation. Jane?
Well, Bob and Barbara, 1,100 people spent the night on the floor, the gymnasium floor of Dr. Phillips High School last night, and the Red Cross estimates there could be 500 of them back here tonight. That's because they're being told to stay away from South Florida until Andrew's path of destruction can be cleared. A kind word served up with food and warm blankets is all these hurricane refugees have to go on right now. Most live in Dade County, in the hardest hit areas, and are being told to stay away tonight.
We called up the apartment and they said that they have no electricity, no water, and it's so difficult there. No elevator.
There are hundreds in the same boat here at Dr. Phillips. Every hour they line up by the phone to try to find out what Andrew has done to their homes.
I have a nursery and homestead that's probably blown down. I have a 2-story house that's about 1/8 of a mile from the air base that could be blown down, but we're safe here.
In the meantime, Central Florida pitches in with food, volunteers, and of course entertainment to make the wait a little easier. Now, earlier this morning, we put out a call for food because there were so many people here, and as you saw, Central Florida responded in a very generous way. The Red Cross is saying tonight that there is a shortage of baby food and diapers. So if someone is willing to make a donation, please call the Red Cross. And they're also asking for monetary donations to their disaster relief fund. Back to you.
Well, I hope they get it. For a lot of folks, this has turned into a real adventure.
And a lot of families are here.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. Well, Ross Cavett is in South Florida tonight. He's been traveling all day through Broward and Dade counties following the destructive path of Hurricane Andrew.
And I bet a lot of those people at the shelter want to know this story. Ross joins us now live from Miami with pictures of what he's found. Ross?
Yeah, you know, we've heard a lot about what the hurricane has done. We've seen pictures of the hurricane winds bending the palm trees, the people in the evacuation centers. But to put a real perspective on what this hurricane has done for South Florida, we went to South Dade County, talked to some people who decided to ride out the storm and saw some incredible destruction that has those folks reduced to the basics of survival.
There are no words.
Marguerite Cadenas says last night was hell and the days ahead will be sequels.
I've been in hurricanes and this is horrible. I've never seen anything like this. It's just the damage and then the roofs, have people's roofs falling off. It's just atrocious.
Hurricane Andrew damaged her home and completely destroyed her neighbors. They came running to her in the middle of the storm.
The roof just flew right off. The people were screaming. There was 9 people in a little closet, hall closet, and they came to our front door. We didn't hear them. Eventually we heard the screams when we're going around back to the side of the house.
The damage in South Dade is so intense, pictures don't do it justice. The hurricane robbed residents of their homes, lifestyles, and security.
You can't even recognize the place. You're walking down on the other side, you can't even recognize where you are.
Not your neighborhood anymore.
No way.
Let me tell you, I could not recognize Colonial Drive. I could not recognize the neighborhood. It's unbelievable. I just do not recognize it.
The hurricane's victims are still too much in shock to worry about insurance, assistance, even where they'll get their next meal. Many claim they're the forgotten victims of this storm. They're not forgotten. There's just so many of them. No one's been able to help. We do hear a lot about people trying to calculate a dollar figure for the damages of the hurricane. That will simply be epic. The destruction we saw today was total and incredible in neighborhoods in South Dade County. Millions of people have been affected, their lives forever altered. It's a scene that will certainly give me a new perspective on the hurricane. It's kind of a fun adventure for journalists, but when you see the kind of effect it has on people, it's hard for me to explain it to you folks, but it is incredible. Back to you.
You are absolutely right. And all of that was wind damage, too, not water damage, right?
That's correct. That was all the 150, 160 mile an hour winds that roared through that neighborhood.
That's incredible.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
Ross. Well, now that Hurricane Andrew has passed over Florida, what kind of weather can we expect? And where is the hurricane headed now? Danny Trainer will join us with the latest.
And we will hear from some ham radio operators who are trying to keep the lines of communication open. It's difficult tonight in South Florida because of all the power lines that are down. But the Florida Turnpike is open through Miami and tolls have been suspended indefinitely. But south of Miami, the Turnpike extension is closed. Officials say travel is hazardous in much of Dade County, and many roads in the area south of Miami have been closed.
Communication is all but impossible in parts of South Florida, too, and that means amateur radio operators are extra busy. A statewide civil emergency network has now been set up in Brevard County, and operators are sending and receiving disaster information. They're also providing another important service, getting messages to loved ones.
There are many relatives and friends, and in our cases, even the state agencies that need to reach their agencies in the Broward and Dade areas. Amateur radio provides those links. Now, of course, the priority would be the state needs and other agencies like the Red Cross. After that's taken care of, then it's health and welfare. You know, I've got someone living in Miami. I don't know where they are. I don't know if they're alive. Can you find out anything about them?
Now, Brevard County stations are being used as relay centers for Dade and Broward County to contact Tallahassee for the needed aid and assistance down there. Well, we sure missed it, but they have really been devastated.
And you know, we haven't had a lot of information out of the Keys. There just is no communication out of there, and they're stopping people from going in. So
in this case, it may not be. If we had
the information, we would share the information.
Yeah, but no news may not be good news either.
Right,
from the
and
Keys.
you say the tolls have been suspended, huh?
Yeah. Up to this point. Takes a
Here in
hurricane
Central
to
Florida,
do that.
the East-West Expressway would have doubled them. Other than that, I guess the most predominant question we've been receiving on the phone is, will this storm double back, wobble back toward the state? I would say very slim chance. I've learned to say never to say never.
There's always some chance, yeah.
Exactly, but I don't think it's going to be swinging back toward the state of Florida. Yeah. We want to bring you up to date because our weather pattern here today was just like almost a normal day, except it was a little breezier, a little balmier, and maybe not as many thunderstorms. Maybe it actually pulls some moisture away from us. We're starting to get some things on radar, but let's begin with our current temperatures. And the conditions outside are partly cloudy. Tomorrow's going to be just like any other day. You'd never know there was a storm that had moved through the area. We currently have winds out of the east of 14. Humidity is 61%, and the barometer is falling. Here's what the temperature ranges are. Ocala 88, 87 in Daytona Beach. Orlando's 88, 84 in Lakeland, and Melbourne with 90. Our local radar shows some smattering of showers around this area. You might find them a bit gusty as they pass over you, and they may drop a little bit of rain and then move right away. And so what it is it's the effects of Andrew actually pushing some of these things still through this area. It's actually the back side of the feeder bands. Now I want to take you south and show you another radar. This is the last radar pictures we've gotten of Andrew. As it pulls away from the state of Florida, the curve of the earth interferes with our reception and we lose it to the curve, but we have other resources. If you are tracking the storm and Andrew still is a hurricane, it's at 25.8 north and 83.9 west, still moving west at 18 miles an hour, highest winds at 140 miles an hour. But it's over prime warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. There's a very good chance this thing could intensify. And right now, things don't look too good around Louisiana. It is 470 miles south of New Orleans. Now, let me show you our projected window of movement. Here's where it is right now, off the coast of Florida, and starts moving toward Louisiana and possibly making landfall sometime between 6 p.m. Tuesday and 6 p.m. Wednesday. And then, once it gets inland, it becomes a big storm, and eventually it may become a major flood producer, I think, for parts of the Plains states. I think areas like Missouri and places like that could be in for a lot of water out of this storm. Just thought you might like to see a loop of this as it moves away from the state of Florida and starts bearing down on the Gulf Coast. Also, the current map shows where it's located. Here is a cold front that's coming down. Somewhere in between, these two are going to meet, and that could be bad news. Let's talk about the coast forecast. On the coast, temperatures tomorrow will be 88, partly cloudy skies. The winds, generally out of the east at about 15 to 20 knots, and seas will be running 4 to 8 feet. And surf will be choppy and hazardous. Here's the forecast. Breezy with a low tonight of 76 and the chance of rain is 20%. Tomorrow, we up the temperature to 92 and the chance of rain is 35%. And the 5-day forecast, it sounds and looks normal.
Okay.
Steve is down there. He should be back sometime tomorrow. But if you're going surfing, don't.
Okay, I promise.
Some good advice.
Thanks a lot, Danny. In just a moment, more on the relief efforts in South Florida. Stay with us.
All the relief efforts in South Florida.
And as Jack Hambrick explains, they had no trouble putting volunteers to work.
Red Cross volunteers loaded up with food and other supplies headed for storm-ravaged Miami.
Okay, have a good trip, fellas, and good luck.
See you down the highway somewhere.
The Red Cross staging area here in Orlando is coordinating the whole relief effort in South Florida.
Most of the people that are going to be leaving today are going to be operating feeding vans. They're going to be feeding the disaster victims and emergency workers, people trying to clear the streets and restore their homes.
30 trucks shipped out this afternoon. The volunteers driving them come from all over the country. Marilyn Hall rushed down here from Alabama last night.
Why do you do it?
Because I enjoy helping people who need to be helped.
And storm victims in Miami will need plenty of that. The Red Cross will be assisting 83,000 people at over 200 shelters.
Jim Ferguson, can I help you?
In all, the Red Cross here has just a few hundred volunteers, and their job is just beginning. Jack Hambrick, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
Governor Lawton Chiles has issued a call for 200 volunteer nurses to relieve nurses in the hardest hit area, Miami. Nurses there have been working around the clock, staffing many overcrowded shelters. 7 hospitals evacuated patients to Baptist Hospital in Miami and Jackson Hospital. We learned from one patient coordinator nurse the situation is very serious.
How are things going?
The executive director of the Florida Nurses Association calls the patient care coordinator at Baptist Hospital in Miami. It's one of 2 hospitals in the area shouldering the major job of treating victims of Hurricane Andrew. She hears the scene is like a battle zone.
That must be horrible for people who are trying to take care of other people and worried about their own families.
Here at the Red Cross Center at Dr. Phillips High School, the conditions are not nearly so bleak. Here they have water. In Miami, they do not. Hospitals there have to rely on bottled water, and the supply there is low. In Miami, there is no air conditioning, and the sanitary facilities at hospitals are only portable toilets. Nurse Mimi Gowden can well imagine how bad it must be. She worked here non-stop since last night. Memories haunt her of another time, another place, where she worked all night, only to find when she went home, a storm had made her a victim too.
It was a flood in Corning, New York. So I lost everything, my car and everything, so I know how people feel. That's why I volunteered to come up here and help out.
Wayne and Shelley Marshall are glad nursing care is here if their 15-month-old daughter needs help. In Miami, healthcare workers are stretched painfully thin at hospitals and shelters.
We came here because we knew we'd be a little more better off, you know, with our livelihood and with the nursing situation also.
The Health and Human Services Office in Tallahassee is coordinating all requests for special nursing help as well as volunteer nurses who wish to offer their help. If you are a licensed nurse in Florida and you wish information on volunteering, call the HRS Hurricane Hotline at 904-488-0309.
Thank goodness for people like that. All right. How are things over at Daytona Beach tonight? We'll show you in just a moment. They didn't keep sunbathers away from Daytona Beach.
The winds are strong and the water is rough, but Pam Regas in Volusia County says the worst may be yet to come.
The waves are getting a mixed review here on Daytona Beach.
It's great. It's a lot of fun. I'm a swimmer, I'm a lifeguard, and I love the waves like this.
I think that the waves are really scary. They're really strong, and I couldn't stand up out there. I was scared.
The surf is so rough right now. We have 4 or 5 foot surf on our shoreline, and you might think that'd be dangerous, but really it's just the opposite. It knocks the people in so they can't get out much past waist deep, so we generally don't experience a whole lot of problems with rough surf like this. When the surf subsides, then we'll get the runouts, and then we're going to have a problem.
There's another danger that may soon be lurking in the waters.
If we keep getting winds from the east and southeast 3 or 4 days, we're probably going to experience some problems with man-o-war and other types of jellyfish.
It was just a couple weeks ago that swimmers by the hundreds were getting stung by jellyfish.
Unfortunately, this type of weather is going to bring them in again.
Throughout the summer, other than the big wave that hit here, there have been no big surfs. Lifeguards say there has been such an accumulation of sand, they expect no problem with beach erosion as a result of Hurricane Andrew. Even so, lifeguards say the beach is still taking a bit of a battering. Now, if you plan on coming swimming at the beach, lifeguards ask that you please swim in front of a manned lifeguard station because not all the stations are open at this time. Back to you.
That's our news.
We'll be right back.
News Channel. This is 6 News, an eye on Hurricane Andrew.
Good morning from 6 Sports.
Put his hand on
I got it, right.
Hey man, get your feet on my neck.
Well, get your arms down. Stop fighting.
My arms ain't up.
The National Guard has no mercy on looters who started clearing the stores once the storm cleared Miami. Hello, everyone. Good to have you with us for 6 News.
Andrew came crashing on shore before dawn this morning in South Florida, and when the sky had cleared, people started hitting the streets, shocked at the damage they were witnessing.
Miami and the surrounding area pounded by winds clocked at more than 140 miles per hour. Reporter Ed Trosky spent all night and morning following the storm in Miami.
Across South Florida, so many power lines are down, so many trees, so many roads closed. The best view is from the air, and you won't see anything so devastating as what we saw from our Skywatch helicopter this afternoon. Entire neighborhoods in South Dade look like they've been leveled by a bomb. Hurricane Andrew flattened this trailer park. Nearby, row after row of single-family homes, minus their roofs. Tonight, Tamiami Airport is a graveyard for small airplanes. Andrew's 138-mile-an-hour sustained winds toss them around like plastic toys. This is the reason hurricane forecasters warn people not to ride out hurricanes in high-rise buildings. The powerful storm blew out windows on nearly every floor of the Daytron building. Bloomingdale's at Cutler Ridge is wiped out too. The most sickening sight we saw today, looters stealing merchandise from this TJ Maxx shopping center on South US 1, and not a police officer in sight. After an aerial tour of South Florida today, it is easy to say this cleanup will not be days, but many weeks, possibly even months. In the air over South Florida, Ed Trosky, 6 News.
Hurricane Andrew headed west this morning straight for Naples and Fort Myers.
Still packing dangerous winds and heavy rain. 6 News reporter Shepard Smith followed Andrew through southwest Florida.
Old Glory barely escaped with her stripes. Andrew raced across South Florida, splintering Naples trees like no force in 30 years. The big one hit and split and for hours refused to quit. Andrew's winds gust to 100 miles an hour here, peeling and twisting the bark right off helpless trees. Many did not survive at all. Others formed roadblocks. The driving winds, torrential rains, and pounding slivered hail left miles of power lines grounded, lifted gas stations, pounded their pumps. And remaining in the end, water. More than any saturated land could sponge away. Streets and trailer parks became rivers. Only boats will return residents here tomorrow. Of course, not everyone needs a boat on flooded streets in a city which survived the backside of the big one.
Shepard Smith, 6 News.
And bad guy Andrew has now moved into the Gulf, so where will he stop next?
Pamela Kister is in the Weather Center tracking the storm as she has all weekend. Pamela?
Well, right now it's about 470 miles to the south of New Orleans, and it continues to move to the west at 18 miles an hour. It looks like in the next few hours it's going to take a gradual turn to the west-northwest, and that's because of a big frontal system that's in the central part of the nation, what's left over from Hurricane Lester, and that system's going to pull it up. Remember, hurricanes follow other systems. thunderstorms. They aren't on a path of their own. They follow steering currents. It's going to pull that up, we think, probably by tomorrow afternoon, late in the day, or tomorrow night. And then it's going to be somebody's hurricane in the Gulf Coast. We're going to show you where the warnings are in just a second. Meantime, the latest coordinates are 25.8 north, 83.9 west. Again, moving west at 18 miles an hour, going to turn, it looks like, to the west-northwest in the next couple of hours. Still, the winds are 140 miles an hour, and yes, it looks like it certainly could strengthen tomorrow when the sun comes out. The water temperature out there is in the middle 80s, about 85, 86 degrees, so all the right ingredients to make this thing even more powerful than what it is. Okay. I want to show you where the watches and warnings are right now. The warnings are in effect from Vermilion Bay over to Pascagoula, Mississippi, and that's where it's going to be probably through tomorrow night. Again, it looks like it will hit landfall tomorrow night, probably between 5 and 8 o'clock. That will certainly depend on how quickly it's moving. Right now it is moving at about 18 miles an hour. I would like to share our radar picture with you right now just to show you that we are certainly in the clear. That's one of the questions everyone is asking right now. We've got a couple of scattered showers and thunderstorms on the radar picture, and they are moving west at about 25 to 30 miles an hour, but that is moving away from us to the west-northwest in the next few hours. But we'll track it, David and Michelle, and we'll let you know.
Okay, Pamela. And just once again, to calm those fears of people who have been calling and asking, it's highly unlikely that Andrew would turn back and move back across central Florida.
Well, you know, I know where those fears are coming from. Those fears are coming from Hurricane Donna in 1960, where it came over like this and then shot up and went across central Florida. At this point, like we're saying, it looks like the frontal system in the central part of the nation is going to suck that hurricane up. So it's going to be moving away from us. I would certainly say, you know, it's hard to stand here and say, yes, we're in the clear, but all things point to the fact that we are. Our 5-day forecast coming up later on in the show will show us typical thunderstorms in the afternoon, and this is moving away from us. And as much as we hate to say it, also, it's going to be a big problem for the folks in the Gulf Coast states, not us.
All right. Thanks a lot, Pamela. Well, the rush to get back to South Florida jammed up I-95 all the way down the East Coast. In Brevard County, a special effort is underway to make sure everyone arrives home safely. 6 News reporter Linda Hurtado joins us live now from I-95 in Brevard County. Linda, how's the traffic looking? From what we can see, it's not too heavy.
Well, it's moving quite in a steady flow. It's been moving this way all day, and there have been times during the day that the traffic has been moving very slowly. Now, the American Red Cross was concerned that people would be in such a hurry to get back to South Florida, they'd be a threat on the highway. So they kicked in a plan of action to keep drivers safe and alert.
Break 19, this is Space Coast React.
It's a long road home for some weary travelers. Forced to evacuate South Florida Sunday, they're now fighting crowds to get back home.
It's really been bad. Back at about the 190-mile marker, there was a truck turned over in the road. We sat up there for an hour and 20 minutes.
This is the semi choking traffic near Cocoa.
We're having a safety break for all the southbounders.
The American Red Cross is concerned about those frustrated, tired drivers. They're ordering highway aid. REACT volunteers are responding.
We have coffee, iced tea, lemonade, and soft drinks. The drinks have been contributed by different vendors.
Not only are they serving food and drink for anyone who needs it, but they have this radio system to alert the proper authorities if anyone's in distress.
I think that's the greatest thing I've ever seen.
This REACT stand served a number of utility workers headed for Miami in an 80-truck convoy. For those traveling home to the great unknown, the help is appreciated.
It inspires me. It does my heart good to see all these people pitching in.
Now, the Baker family, they were heading right down this highway to Port St. Lucie. We wish them the best of luck. Hope that they got there. Volunteers say they will be at this rest area as long as people like the Bakers need them. Now, they do rely on donations, and you can drop off donations at the Red Cross Center in Melbourne. Reporting live in Brevard County, I'm Linda Hurtado. Back to you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Linda. David?
Well, so many of you have been calling in here to WCPX to find out information on your loved ones and family members in South Florida. We decided to help out, so we brought in some Red Cross volunteers. Talk to them, asking any questions you might have about what's going on down there. Are your friends and family safe? They'll be answering calls for the next few hours, and to get a hold of them, you need to dial 407-424-WCPX. That is a local call here in the Orlando area. Hundreds of thousands of people fleeing South Florida. Many came to Orlando, filling the thousands of hotel rooms here. But there are reports that some hotels took advantage of the helpless crowds and raised prices. 6 News reporter Tony Pipitone will have that story later in the newscast. Well, does report now. Thank you very much.
Slow crawl that was International Drive today. License plates hint there's more than theme parks attracting this crowd. Many were seeking refuge from Andrew, and by 6 last night, they had filled every available hotel room from here to Ocala.
We ended up referring probably another 200 to 300 rooms elsewhere out into the marketplace. The closest Holiday Inn that was showing rooms was up in the border of Georgia.
So, with rooms being scarfed up so quickly, some hoteliers decided to juice up the prices a bit.
I think they were gouging us a bit. $65 we paid, and I thought it would be a bit cheaper than that.
In fact, a source who finds rooms for tourists along US 192 told me prices were getting jacked up by 15% by midday yesterday. A reservation clerk at this Days Inn in Altamont told me by phone that rates were raised 25% because of the demand from those fleeing Andrew, but the manager told me in person that was not the case. Same for the Holiday Inn across the way.
We've got several policies in place to make sure that there isn't, any type of rate gouging that could happen.
Did you boost them up a little, though?
No, definitely not.
You think others did?
I wouldn't speculate on that.
All right. Winds ripped it apart and tore away parts of the roof at a South Miami shopping center today.
Workers continue to plow through the mess made by Hurricane Andrew, trying to figure out exactly how much damage and how to stop looters that are causing more loss.
Reporter Regina Blakely is standing by on the scene with more. Hi, Regina.
Hi, Michelle. Hi, David. I'm here in South Miami. Now, this, of course, is where the eye of the hurricane came through. And as you can see behind me, I just want to show you this picture of this man up on top of his house as he's working. This is actually the personal tragedy of what this hurricane actually means. This section of housing in South Miami is actually an area that's not actually known as the evacuation zone. These people are 2 to 3 miles inland, and because of that, they really didn't think that they had to worry about evacuating. And as you can see behind me, they really did need to worry about it. This was a shopping center at one time. You can see what the destructive winds did, and you can also see in the center here what was once a parking lot is now a lake. Over 10 inches of rain fell in just a very short period of time with this storm. That was something about this storm that was very unusual, made it a little bit different from Hurricane Hugo. You remember how big Hugo was? This storm was smaller, and it was also faster, and that meant that it could cause a lot more damage in a quicker amount of time. One more thing I thought you might like to see, if we can point up here. I know we're pointing to the sun. You probably don't like this, but you can see the steel and the different pieces of steel that have just been ripped off buildings by that wind, and just absolutely, they look like paper in the way that they've been ripped around the poles here. Stoplights are dangling by wires, electric wires, phone wires are all dangling down. It's actually very dangerous to be out here right now, and that's sort of the facts. Now, the National Guard has been called in, and basically they've been called in to prevent looting. There has been some looting in the area, and so they've instituted a curfew, 7 p.m. tonight to 7 a.m. tomorrow. Miami police will make sure no one is out on the streets. Michelle and David?
Regina, we talked with you at 5:30 tonight. Can you tell us some of these people returning home to find not a whole lot left? What's going to happen with them tonight?
Yeah, we have to wonder how much insurance some of these people had, because I know if you're like I am, you sometimes put those little details off, and even if you live in an area like this where you might know that this could happen, you tend to say, oh, well, I'll deal with that tomorrow. Many of these people may not have had the insurance that they need, and so therefore they're wondering today what their lives are going to be like. Also, these homes are really not constructed for those high winds, hurricane winds, and also the tornadic winds that came with them. So many of these people have walked by and told me today they're not exactly sure what their lives hold for them now.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Regina. More hurricane coverage on 6 News. President Bush wants to see the damage up close.
And remember, the Red Cross is here in our 6 News studios to take your calls and questions on Hurricane Andrew's aftermath.
While many people are being kept out in South Florida, out of even their own neighborhoods, 2 high-powered visitors are on their way.
Charna Davis is live in Video Room 6 with details on the arrival of President Bush and Governor Childs. Charna?
You know, this is the first night more than 1 million people are going to be spending after Andrew without electricity, and a curfew, a 12-hour curfew, will start in less than an hour. President Bush is scheduled to land at Opa-locka Airport within a couple of minutes. In fact, he may be there already. It's so hard to get information out of Miami minute by minute. He will take a tour of South Dade County. Being that so much of the area is blacked out, there's no telling how much he's going to be able to see because it's going to get dark very soon. Mr. Bush has declared the hurricane's path a disaster area, which will free up federal money.
There will be 27 agencies of the government then ready to help in any way that the federal government can help, and I will be in touch during the day to see that everything runs smoothly and that we do everything we can to help the people down there.
The other high-powered visitors have already toured most of Dade County. Governor Childs and Senator Bob Graham were able to view the wreckage from a UH-16 Black Hawk Army helicopter, and the word is that people were standing by their smashed houses and waving at the helicopter as it flew over. Now, Senator Graham says the entire area looks like a war zone. You know, I was able to speak to some of my family members in South Florida a couple of hours ago. I really can't get through now. And what they were saying is they're so used to living with crime there in Miami that they were hoping that the governor and the president will take a look at the needs for security, because going into this first night without power, knowing all the damage that there is, knowing how many people already started looting in the morning, they're very frightened, and they're hoping that that will be utmost in the leaders' minds as well.
All right, thanks a lot, Charna. We are, though, certainly glad to hear that your mom and brother and sister are all okay. Well, the damage from Hurricane Andrew not only includes buildings, cars, and fallen trees, power is also lost. Reporter Regina Blakely just telling us 1 million people without power tonight. Today, a caravan of Florida power workers from Winter Garden left for Miami. They will repair hundreds of downed power lines and destroyed generators. Crews from Volusia and Brevard counties are also headed south. They say it could take at least a week before power is fully restored. Meantime, hundreds of National Guard troops from Central Florida are in Miami tonight to help out after Hurricane Andrew.
Another reminder, our Red Cross lines are open here at 424 WCPX 407 area code. Volunteers from the Red Cross are taking your call.
If you have loved ones or friends and you need to find out, perhaps they can help you out and point you in the right direction, give you some information. And meteorologist Pamela Kister is just ahead with the very latest on Andrew. We'll be right back.
That's some of what Andrew left behind in South Florida, but where will this major storm go next?
Meteorologist Pamela Kister has a pretty good idea. She's going to let you know right now. Hi, Pamela.
Hello. It is right now about 470 miles south, or actually southeast of New Orleans, and you can see the eye as it's becoming better defined as it moved across the state this morning, still with winds of 140 miles an hour, so keep in mind it's still very powerful. It's still a Category 4 hurricane, and there's a good chance tomorrow as the sun comes out and as it becomes re-energized that it will strengthen and even be stronger. The latest coordinates as of 6 o'clock are 25.8 north and 83.9 west, still moving to the west at 18 miles an hour, but like we said earlier, looks like it's going to take a gradual turn to the west-northwest later on tonight. An unusual situation setting up. Let me just take a moment to explain it to you. Here you can see the cloudy skies, and here is Hurricane Andrew. All of this moisture here moving into the central plain states is what's left over from Hurricane Lester, which was in the Pacific about a week or a week and a half ago. That's streaming up into the plain states along with the cold front. Okay, the frontal system is actually moving east or a little bit more to the east-southeast. And what's going to happen is this system here is actually going to pull up Hurricane Andrew. So we're waiting to see just how quickly the cold front moves across the states and then see how quickly it pulls up Hurricane Andrew. Looks like it's going to happen late tomorrow afternoon or early tomorrow evening as it's going to move onshore somewhere along the Gulf Coast states. Looks like a good bet is up in the Vermilion Bay, Louisiana area, but we'll certainly watch it and we'll let you know. On our radar picture tonight, just to keep you up to date here in Central Florida, that tornado watch that was issued earlier today has been canceled. Nothing to worry about tonight. Partly cloudy skies and a few scattered showers and thunderstorms. The forecast for tonight, we're going to stick with partly cloudy skies, a few evening thunderstorms, our low temperature about 75 to 78, winds out of the southeast at 5 to 10. And for tomorrow, sunshine in the morning, a return to those thunderstorms in the afternoon, pretty typical stuff for us. About a 40 to 50% chance for scattered showers and thunderstorms, winds out of the east at 10 to 15. And your beach and boating forecast, a moderate chop on bay and inland waters, seas 3 to 5 feet, winds out of the southeast at 15 knots. And here's your 5-day forecast. And as you look at the forecast, I've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. That ought to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I guess I was a little tired when I was putting that together, but the forecast essentially is going to stay the same. We're looking for highs in the low to middle 90s with scattered showers and thunderstorms in the afternoon.
That's a gimme.
I think we can forgive her. What do you think?
Thanks, Pamela. Well, Andrew or no Andrew, it was the first day of school for a lot of kids in Central Florida. Just take a look at these smiling faces. A day to meet new teachers, new friends, and get classroom assignments. Most schools opened as scheduled and on time. Brevard, Marion, Polk, and Osceola County schools were closed today because of the hurricane. Many of their gyms used as evacuation shelters. But we are told tonight, Brevard, Osceola, and Marion County schools will be open tomorrow. No word yet from Polk County. We'll try and get that for you real soon, though.
I think it was mostly the teachers smiling, but I think a lot of them are glad to be back at work considering the budget constraints that we're under. Coming up, we'll have more for you on Hurricane Andrew's aftermath.
Stay with us.
Here on 6 News for the latest on Hurricane Andrew. Much more tonight from Miami on what this storm left in its wake. And we hope to take you along as President Bush tours the damage.
Also tonight, meet a group of Central Florida nurses heading down to Miami to help the injured. And that is all coming up tonight on 6 News.
And we have time to check in with Pamela to get the latest on Andrew and our weather forecast.
Let me just share the latest coordinates with you right now in case you're tracking it along with us. 25.8 north and 83.9 west. Again, the winds, the maximum winds right now are at 140 miles an hour, so it still is officially a Category 4 hurricane. And as we talked about earlier in the show, it looks like it could strengthen tomorrow afternoon. Looks like it's going to take a gradual turn to the west-northwest in the next couple of hours, but in the meantime, it's moving west at 18 miles an hour. Right now, it is situated about 470 miles from New Orleans, and it looks like it certainly could be heading in that direction. We're in the safe zone right now. We've just got partly cloudy skies, scattered showers and thunderstorms in our forecast for tonight. Michelle and David.
Pamela, I have to ask you, a hurricane that strong, how far when it hits land could it actually move forward?
How far could it move forward? You mean the storm surge itself?
Right.
Miles, and that's what we saw last night, and that's where you're getting the real intense flooding that's going in 5 and 6 miles, and that's what's going to happen, and that's what's going to happen when all the water pushes into the Midwest.
We're out of time. Good night. Thanks, Pamela.
After examining, nature launches an attack on the U.S. mainland. Hurricane Andrew bombs southern Florida with killer winds and rain.
We've lost our homes. We've lost everything.
The National Guard moves in to keep order, and now the powerful storm is ready to strike again. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting tonight from an area just south of Miami. This area is the hardest hit so far by Hurricane Andrew. Now the question is, where does the hurricane hit next? It hit first and hardest today on the east coast of Florida with winds that gusted up to 165 miles an hour. Right now, the hurricane is in the Gulf of Mexico, expected to hit land again as soon as tomorrow night. The New Orleans area is one possible place for its next landfall. Death toll at least 12, including a minimum of 8 dead in southern Florida. Too soon to total up the immense damage, but you can bet it will be in the many billions. A curfew is in effect in Miami, and the National Guard's been called out. CBS News correspondent Bernard Goldberg was here in Miami with us when Andrew struck.
It was one of the most powerful hurricanes of the century, winds gusting to 165 miles an hour. And if the image makers like to think of Miami as an American paradise, in a flash, Hurricane Andrew turned Miami into a paradise lost. A million people have no electricity, no phones, and many of them have no water. Streets have become obstacle courses. Airports were closed. And tonight, National Guard troops are on the streets enforcing a dusk-to-dawn curfew. The worst damage was in the suburbs south of Miami. But because this is an inland area, about 10 miles from the water, residents were not required to evacuate. A reporter's supposed to be disinterested, a completely objective observer. But it isn't easy when the hurricane hits your block. This is where I live. But I was one of the lucky ones. The unlucky ones are the walking wounded, the people Andrew left devastated.
We have nothing, nothing at all. It's totally took everything, destroyed everything. You don't even have a roof in the house, don't have nothing. Everything and everywhere, it's just gone. We've lost everything and everybody's homeless. I don't know what we're going to do.
I guess everybody's in the same shape around here. Some of them's whole houses are gone. I do have some walls left, but that's it.
And in one of the wealthiest parts of town, Andrew mocked the people in their expensive homes too. And tonight, President Bush came to Miami to inspect the damage. One of his sons lives in the area worst hit. The hurricane ripped through Miami in just a few hours, but it will take weeks in some places, months in others, before Miami is back to normal. Dan, you've been through enough hurricanes to know that in a much deeper sense, things don't really get back to normal. You start to wonder if something like this can happen again, and the simple fact of the matter is, the answer is yes, it can. And remember, Andrew is just the first hurricane of this season.
Bernie, we know that people are hurting. There's a lot of pain out there. It would help to have the power on, to have the lights on. How soon can that happen?
Boy, it sure would, Dan. For some people, it may happen in a matter of hours or days, but for others, the sad fact is it's going to take a long time, probably weeks.
Thanks, Bernie. Andrew became a tropical storm 1 week ago today. It was upgraded to a hurricane on Saturday morning out in the Atlantic east of the Bahamas. Churning westward, Andrew struck the top of the Bahamas last night, reportedly leaving 4 people dead there. Then the hurricane came plumb bob straight right to the coast of Florida, slamming ashore this morning just after 5 o'clock Eastern Time, 25 miles southwest of Miami. The eye of the storm tore through the community of Homestead, then raced, luckily for Floridians, across the very southern tip of Florida. Remember, the Everglades takes up a lot of that space, and 3 hours later entered the Gulf of Mexico. And that's where Hurricane Andrew is tonight, out in the Gulf of Mexico. It is expected to hit land again, with Mississippi and Louisiana considered the most likely places where it may hit. Now, earlier today, I went to perhaps the hardest hit area of Florida, that Homestead section of the state, 25 miles just southwest of here in Miami. The eye of the hurricane roared directly over Homestead moments after slamming first into the edge of the Florida coast. This is the Highway of Heartbreak, Florida's new Trail of Tears. As we drove south on the Florida Turnpike from Miami down toward Homestead, the extent of the damage was stunningly evident. The word is incredible. The place is an overpass near Homestead, Florida. The main force of the hurricane winds came through here. Gust up to 165 miles an hour. Let me show you something. See, these are light poles on the overpass. This is where one was. The force and twist of the wind broke this off. The whole light pole is down there. Now, from here in the overpass, as far as the eye can see, there are, I do not exaggerate, thousands of roofs blown off homes in this area. A storage facility that looked as if it had been bombed. Personal belongings blown everywhere. Overturned vehicles were scattered and strewn for miles.
Well, welcome to the Holiday Inn.
Welcome to the Holiday Inn, where we found not only a building destroyed, but lives in shambles too.
We are at the hotel. Just a few employees will stay because our house is. We lived on Holiday Road. There's no house. We have no house to go back to. And Paul, my brother, you see us? You see us? Brand new. Up in Pensacola, come get us.
Don't cry.
Don't cry.
At least you're alive.
It's okay.
Don't cry.
It's okay. It's okay. What's been lost?
Well, I'm the food and beverage director. I've lost my restaurant, and my bar, my banquet rooms. We've lost our homes. We've lost everything.
The National Guard was hurried to this shopping center where, incredibly, looting was going on during the storm. And what's happened here?
These 3 gentlemen right here are under arrest for looting. They were caught inside here by members of the Guard and a Met-to-Date officer as they were inside the Bernines.
What this was, I don't know, but it was a 3/4 of a city block of something. Gone, leveled. Across the street, Toys R Us has become Toys Was Us. Completely destroyed. President Bush has declared 3 counties federal disaster areas, and in the neighborhoods you could see why. People trying to climb out, clean up, and figure out what they had left. Anybody hurt?
No, nobody was in there. Everybody, we were inside, you know, my parents were in the bathroom with my brother and sister, and I was in the closet with some friends.
Are you Catholic?
Yeah.
Were you praying?
Oh, yeah.
Whole night.
This was your room?
Yep. I mean, it's just ironic that you know, that picture there that was just given to us is just standing still there, but...
And the people. These people are not accustomed to easy lives. Today they kept telling us it was worse someplace else. And it was. Did you think you might die?
Yes, one time I thought the roof was coming off and we would go flying.
So what were you doing at that moment?
What I was doing, praying. Very hard.
After a long night, everyone who lives along the Homestead Highway is still in shock, still in disbelief. You know, I think some people saw some of the hurricane and said, well, it's not so bad.
It is. It's terrible.
I don't think anybody got killed, so that's a good part.
That's a good part. That's a good point.
Well, property can always be replaced.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Good luck to
thank
you. Good luck.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Good luck.
We need it.
Sorry this happened to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, they need it. Luck and a lot of help. Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, live from Florida. We'll take you across the Gulf to the place the hurricane may hit next, so stay here with us. Back here live in southern Florida now, thousands of people spent a nerve-wracking night in shelters. Many of those who went home today had their hearts broken, their dreams shattered, as Giselle Fernandez reports from West Dade County.
For many who braced themselves for the howling nightmare of Hurricane Andrew in shelters, not knowing what the morning would bring seemed unbearable. But at daybreak, first light on the disaster for many seemed far worse than imagined.
Oh my God.
Even residents who weathered the storm in their homes couldn't believe how devastating the night had been. What did you do to get through this last night?
Just sat there in the kitchen. I was praying to the Lord. And it helped.
Doris, a widow with no home or flood insurance, lost almost everything. Parts of her roof caved in. Her bedroom was demolished. Shattered windows littered the floor. Her car and backyard both are in ruins.
This is as clean as...
Doris's neighbor, Gino Sanfilippo, also was hit hard. Before the hurricane, he had plans to retire and sell the house, now flooded and destroyed.
The truth of it is, you get wiped out after you build up something for so many years. Just unbelievable.
156th Street is one of the neighborhoods hit hardest by Hurricane Andrew. As if the chaos in their homes and here out in the streets is not enough, neighbors are having to contend with yet one more battle. Some are having to fight off looters. Looters also have begun preying on businesses, unabashed, taking advantage of the crisis.
It's pretty sad. You know, the people have to really get on to people when they're down.
Some residents can't even seek refuge or comfort in their neighborhood churches, demolished in the storm.
I could not imagine that it was anything like this. They're going to have to tear the whole building down, and I'm just wondering where we're going to go to church.
Despite beaten spirits, Doris, Gino, and the neighbors have already begun cleaning up, rebuilding. They wasted no time. For some residents, the cleanup is going to be very extensive, and 90% of Florida homeowners reportedly have no flood insurance. All hurricane survivors are being urged to apply for government aid very quickly because the low-interest loans that are offered do tend to run out quickly. And before I sign off, Dan, I should note that in the shopping center where we've been standing, looting has continued to go on this evening. Right out in the open, people have been driving up, running into the stores, raiding them, taking out bags of stolen goods and driving away, not seeming to care whether they're seen or whether or not they're caught. Dan?
A footnote, the National Guard is on duty with the police, but the U.S. military is not. Giselle, you and I know there's a poignant story on every street corner, every block. Which one burned deepest in your memory bank today?
I guess the story of Doris, the woman that you saw in my piece just a moment ago, she's alone, she's a widow, and she's lost really everything. And really it's the community neighbors who have come to her aid to help her out. And I think it's that kind of spirit that really keeps this community together. And the spirit that the people say they still don't want to leave Florida. They love it here, this is their home, and they won't let a hurricane drive them out. I like that spirit.
Thanks, Giselle, who is in southern Dade County. After its 3-hour rampage, the hurricane entered the Gulf of Mexico just below Naples on Florida's west coast. Near Naples, in Everglades City, and on Marco Island, there were overturned cars, flooding, and some damage. But CBS News correspondent Aaron Hayes reports the area escaped the kind of destruction the hurricane inflicted on South Florida's other eastern side. Now, the hurricane is now turning its attention to the Gulf Coast. It could strike anywhere from the Mississippi-Alabama line on over to Louisiana, possibly even as far over as Texas, within the next 48 hours. Hurricane warnings are up in the area. The mayor of Grand Isle, Louisiana, a very low place, warned that Andrew is coming like, quote, a bull out of the chute. Scott Pelley is in New Orleans.
Good evening, Dan. Just a few hours ago, the mayor of New Orleans ordered the evacuation of low-lying areas. This evening, those evacuations are well underway. The people in Bayou country know they have precious little time once the water begins to rise. This Mississippi Delta area is perhaps one of the most vulnerable in all of the Gulf Coast region because many people are living on nothing more than the sediment of the river. Their houses are built on that sediment just a few inches above the waterline. Oil companies today began evacuating thousands of offshore workers and bringing in as many of their offshore oil rigs as possible. We are told that levee control district workers are now filling thousands of sandbags and are busy closing the 111 levee gates that protect the city of New Orleans. It's important to remember that New Orleans is virtually completely below sea level. It's helpful to think of the city as being in the bottom of a soup bowl with the levee system forming the edge around it. The mayor of New Orleans says today that anyone who is able to evacuate now should do so, although that evacuation of the entire city is not yet mandatory. We understand that the governor of Louisiana has put the National Guard on standby. Dan?
Scott, in the late 50s, it was a terrible hurricane with a high death toll in that area of Louisiana, around New Orleans, between New Orleans and the Texas border. Is there any talk around New Orleans that this could be, in its own way, perhaps the worst hurricane this half-century?
It could be, Dan, because the worst hurricane that has ever come ashore here was a Category 3. Andrew, as you noted earlier, is a Category 4. And the people at the River Control District tell us they don't know what'll happen if the flood stage goes above 15 or 20 feet. It could easily breach the levees at that point.
Thanks, Scott. And that's a Category 4 on a 5, scale 5 being the worst. We're going to have more about the hurricane, particularly an update on where it is and where it may be headed a little later on the broadcast. But right now, stay here with us for the CBS Evening News. We're going to take you to Somalia, Africa, and show you what's happening there. Live now from Florida, our old friend and one of the world's great hurricane experts, Dr. Neil Frank, is standing by at Channel 11 in Houston. Dr. Frank, what can we expect next?
Well, Dan, everybody anticipates that the storm is going to turn to the northwest. If that turn takes place in the next couple of hours, then it could be Alabama or Mississippi. If the turn is delayed, then we're talking about Louisiana and maybe even the upper Texas coast, so we're watching it very carefully.
And its top sustained winds at the moment are?
140 miles an hour, and it could gather some more strength.
Whew. Thanks, Dr. Neil Frank. Our thanks to also the friends at AT&T, American Telephone and Telegraph, who've been so terrific to us and for us today. Dan Rather, reporting live from Florida for the CBS Evening News. For news about the hurricane, stay tuned to this CBS station. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
CBS News. This is CBS.
Andrew's aftermath tonight at 11.
In Florida, a storm named Andrew has rearranged or wiped away lifetimes of work and savings. And as thousands of people began the overwhelming task of cleaning up, thousands more along the Gulf Coast prepare for the worst and wonder, are we next?
This is CNN's Prime News.
with Bernard Shaw in Washington and Cheryl Atkinson sitting in for Susan Rook at the CNN Center in Atlanta.
Thanks for joining us. Along a wide swath of southern Florida, this is the beginning of a night without light and power, a night without clean water. For many, a night without a home. As this day began, Hurricane Andrew crashed into the South Florida coast. Sustained winds were 140 miles an hour. One wind gust was measured at 164 miles an hour. In the storm's wake, at least 8 people are dead. The damage is estimated to be in the billions of dollars. 3 counties have been declared disaster areas. The pictures of buildings splintered and cracked open by the storm convey more than words can ever tell. But the story of Hurricane Andrew is far from over. In cities and towns along the coasts of Louisiana and Mississippi, people are buying supplies or trying to get away. The hurricane is gaining strength and spinning westward in the Gulf of Mexico. Now let's get an update on Hurricane Andrew's path and strength from CNN's Karen McGinnis.
Thank you, Bernie. And yes, this storm is definitely not over. We have a graphic to show you where we anticipate the probable or possible landfall of Hurricane Andrew. From Vermilion Bay, and as you can see, it's well to the west of New Orleans. Here's New Orleans, here is Vermilion Bay, which encompasses a good portion of the New Orleans or the Louisiana coast, all the way over to Pascagoula, Mississippi, and that does extend over to Mobile, Alabama, the hurricane watch, and then back over to the Sabine Pass area of Texas. But it has been fairly consistent within this Vermilion Bay as well as the Pascagoula, Mississippi area. All day long, the National Hurricane Center has said this looks pretty good for things in the surface of the atmosphere, in the upper levels of the atmosphere, also conditions in the Gulf of Mexico, and that does include the extraordinarily warm water for this time of year. Let's give you the latest coordinates, and these are the very latest as of 8 p.m. They have just been updated. 26.1 degrees north, 84.9 degrees west. It is moving towards the west. Now, this is kind of a key issue here, and that is they're fairly sure at the National Hurricane Center that this will be steered a little bit more towards the west and then towards the northwest. So perhaps sometime this evening or during the early morning hours, and I'll certainly be here, we can update you on how this storm is going to change. But the winds now still at 140 miles an hour, but you have to remember this is a ripe zone for this hurricane to in fact gain more strength, and they mentioned that in the last advisory as of 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's show you those satellite pictures as Hurricane Andrew moved across the Bahamas, then across southern Florida. Look at this last picture. We'll run it again, and you can see just how clear the center of that storm is. And as it winds up, that lets you know just how fierce this storm system is. Now, don't be passive if you live along the Gulf Coast areas. You should be taking stock now. There are, in fact, some evacuations planned for some coastal counties in Mississippi. And if an evacuation order is issued, you would probably be advised to heed those orders as they were in southern Florida. Now, here's the projected path. As you can see, the storm system is now just about 410 miles to the southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana. And according to the National Hurricane Center, they put models together. They see what is in the atmosphere next to this system. They see what is in the atmosphere at the surface in the Gulf of Mexico. And we have coordinated that track and plotted it, and that does put it just to the west of the New Orleans area. And you have to remember, it doesn't take much rainfall for this area to flood, and you get a storm surge, and this could be devastating once again. So the deadly path of Hurricane Andrew just does not stop, but we'll be here in just about another 25 minutes to give you another update. Cheryl?
All right, Karen, the worst in nature sometimes brings out the worst in people. Looters have tried to help themselves to scattered pieces of homes and businesses, but it can also bring out the best in people. Friends have come to help the victims of the storm. For these parts of the story, as well as more on the aftermath, we go live to CNN's Charles Jaco in Cutler Ridge, Florida. Charles?
Well, good evening from Cutler Ridge. Cutler Ridge is the kind of neighborhood people usually don't pay a lot of attention to unless something happens. Well, something definitely happened here. Hurricane Andrew blew through. The area was devastated. Also south of here, Homestead, home to one of the largest U.S. Air Force bases in the world. And we can report now that according to Tony Reardon of the Florida Department of Community Affairs, quote, Homestead Air Force Base no longer exists. According to a military spokesman, every building and Homestead Air Force Base has been destroyed. Now, moments ago in this shopping center where I'm standing in Cutler Ridge, Florida, there was a surprise visitor. President George Bush showed up in a motorcade surrounded by federal officials and Secret Service agents and a mob of media. Several local people tried to get close enough to the president to talk to him. We're unsure if they were successful or not. The president flew in to talk about federal disaster aid for this devastated area and talk about the plans for rebuilding and what could possibly be done. Now, ironically, we had just come back to the shopping center from seeing some mild looting going on nearby here. As CNN's John Zarella reports, there has been some, but not a lot of looting in this area.
As Andrew left South Florida, the looters arrived. The National Guard subduing and arresting several looters, at least one in this dramatic scene carrying a gun.
Take a gun. Get the gun out of there. Get the gun away. Hey.
About 100 guardsmen came to this one area of South Dade County called Cutler Ridge. But by the time they arrived, dozens of people had already torn through stores in this heavily damaged shopping center. Many looters simply ran off carrying the goods. Others backed their cars up to the store and loaded up. Many buildings around this shopping center were destroyed too. The devastation in South Dade, where the eye of the storm barreled across, brought tears as families reunited and assessed the damage. At Miami International Airport, a 727 jet was nose down in the water on a taxiway. A little further south, a tow truck hauled a chunk of expressway sign superstructure down the highway. The scenes of destruction here are widespread, and the losses appear substantial. John Zarella, CNN, in South Dade County.
Now, what's ironic about all this is we were always told that the areas near the coast, right on the coast, the barrier islands, were the most dangerous areas. It turns out in this storm, though, that most of the damage was done inland. Here we've got a map to show you roughly where the Cutler Ridge area is and where the town of Homestead, Florida is. They're not a great distance from the ocean, but then nothing in Florida is a great distance from the ocean, but they are not right on the coast. These areas were absolutely devastated because the eye of the hurricane passed right through here. The tremendous destruction from the front end and the backside of the eye wall reduced dozens of square miles to absolute rubble. The worst destruction was in Homestead, and CNN's Bonnie Anderson has more on that.
At dawn, the road from Miami south to Homestead was a scene of increasing devastation. In Perrine, 150 patients at a nursing home wandered about in mud-soaked debris. The front side of the facility destroyed. On either side of the southbound highway, businesses with caved-in roofs, broken windows, collapsed walls. Looters searched the stores for whatever bounty they could find. In the small town of Naranja, firefighters treated the injured. This man had a severe gash in his neck. Fire rescue officials feared he might not make it to a hospital in time. Several migrant families left homeless by the hurricane asked for help, but there was not enough room, not enough food, not enough water. A mile away, Homestead residents surveying the damage were stunned by what they saw. The city manager estimates 90% of the city was severely damaged, a scene that shook even the strongest.
I've been in Homestead now 15 years, 10 as city manager, and you see these pictures on TV. And you really, we've worked so hard in this community to build what we got. It's 12 years of my life.
Gone?
Not gone, we just got to start over.
Among the worst devastation was at Homestead's 5 trailer camps. This one had 400 mobile homes before Andrew. Now only the shells of 4 or 5 remain, leaving many residents wandering the streets for shelter.
We can't find any place to go. And we had to move out of our trailer park.
Have you been by there?
Oh yes, it's a wreck. There's nothing left.
Well, we were talking about the live people too. Let's use the 2 or 3 dogs per trailer park and just do them first and cover all the major trailer parks.
Unable to physically search the city for possible injured residents, police used the only working phone line to call for search dogs. But they admit it could be days before the city is properly canvassed, before they have a final tally on the dead and injured. 32 police officers from Charleston, South Carolina, a team trained in disaster relief, is arriving to help with that gruesome task. Bonnie Anderson, CNN, Homestead, Florida.
Now, according to the latest estimates we have, approximately 1.3 million people in the Fort Lauderdale and Miami area no longer have electricity. There's no running water in many places. There's an advisory out in all of Dade County, which is the Miami area, to boil water for at least 8 minutes before you drink it, because water pressure keeps dropping and rising, bursting the pipes and therefore creating sanitation problems. The recovery process could take weeks, if not months. Power officials say it could be several weeks before electricity is restored in the homes that are still standing. From other hurricanes we've seen, the storm and the winds and the rain are horrible, but the recovery process is like a long, slow, lingering illness that just seems to go on forever. Charles Jaco, CNN, reporting live from Cutler Ridge.
Charles, I saw Connie Mack walking around with the president and some other state politicians. How was their visit received?
Well, on family television, I don't suppose I could tell you what a couple of people told me. Suffice it to say that a lot of the residents of this largely black, largely working class area around Cutler Ridge were less than impressed with the president showing up. Of course, anybody would be grateful for any aid they could get after a disaster like this, but a lot of people around here told me that they thought it was a political scam.
You covered Hurricane Hugo. Can you compare the damage for us then and now?
Hurricane Hugo in San Juan and St. Croix, where I was, the devastation looked about the same. It was hard to believe. In fact, you were driving through part of the United States as we were driving down here on the Florida Turnpike. Mile after mile after mile of wooden frame houses completely gutted and destroyed. It looked like they'd been the victims of heavy artillery bombardment. The devastation looks like it's about the same. The death toll, thankfully, seems to be much, much lower than it was in Hugo. We're going to have to see what the dollar amount in damage is and how long it's going to take people around here to recover.
We will keep tabs. Thank you. CNN's Charles Jaco from Cutler Ridge, Florida. Bernie?
Cheryl, still to come, help is on the way for the victims of Hurricane Andrew, and we'll keep you updated on the hurricane as Prime News continues. The victims of Hurricane Hugo, the 9th worst Atlantic hurricane of the past 2 decades, know firsthand the devastation of such a storm. Just as it was helped in 1989, the residents of Charleston are extending their hands and opening their pocketbooks to Andrew's victims. They're packing supplies, and some are even heading south to help. The Red Cross is asking for monetary donations so that help can be funneled to Florida and the Gulf Coast, where Andrew is expected to hit next.
The pipeline of aid includes assistance from the federal government. For those who are qualified, the government's plan to help is already underway. More from CNN's Candy Crowley.
What Mother Nature destroys, it is human nature to rebuild.
We've worked so hard in this community to build what we got. It's 12 years of my life.
Gone?
Not gone, we just got to start over. Never gone, there's always tomorrow.
In Washington, they began to think about tomorrow 3 years ago, when federal relief efforts following Hurricane Hugo were criticized as too little and too late. Early out of the gate this time, 2 teams from the Federal Emergency Management Agency headed south Friday as Andrew brewed in the Atlantic. 5 hours after the storm came ashore, FEMA's director was en route as well, promising that Andrew will not be Hugo.
One of the big differences between this storm and Hugo, for instance, is the amount of preparation that has gone on before the storm hit. In the second place is our federal response plan was developed after Hugo to precisely deal with the issues that were raised in Hugo.
Set up to provide relief after local and state money is gone, FEMA coordinates a variety of federal programs. Individuals who meet the criteria can receive grants of up to $11,500 to help with disaster-related expenses, low-interest loans from the Small Business Administration, and temporary housing. Federal tax dollars also foot up to 75% of the tab to help clear and rebuild public roads and schools. First things first, though, and FEMA's immediate concern is public safety and health following the storm.
When you lose your power, you lose water, you lose your sewage systems, you lose many of your emergency response elements that are impeded at that point in time, and we worry considerably about that.
With parts of Florida in shambles and other parts of the U.S. now threatened, FEMA's new structure faces the acid test. Andrew, say officials, is shaping up as one of the worst hurricanes to hit the U.S. this century. Candy Crowley, CNN, Washington.